Hey, what's up, guys? What's going on? Not a whole lot of people on today. I was kind of checking earlier, and I was like, well, I'll kind of maybe stream later into the evening, so I was just kind of waiting for people to get on, but it's a few people. Some of these people we don't run with. And Spotify's down too. I don't know what's going on with Spotify. It just, whenever I try to play something, it just says, what is this little message here? So Spotify can't play this right now. If you have the file on your computer, you can import it. And it doesn't seem like it'll play anything. Everything's doing that. Spotify stuff. I don't know. What you guys up to? Yeah, I did. I relaunched it. That was the first thing I did. Their services are down right now or something, I suppose. Could be regional. Who knows? Who knows? The fix all for everything. Turn it off and turn it back on. If that doesn't work, then it's really broken. Sorry, 1 second. Let me check this DM. Doing work today, make up for 2 days of keys? Yeah. Yeah, I hear you, man. Well, it's just me right now. So we would need a group. See if some people start showing up. We've done so many keys over the last couple of weeks. I wouldn't doubt it if people are doing other things. Oh, so that's the Lego. Fury Warriors got it. Leash the Rage. This guy's got two-hand weapons. Fury Warriors can just like use two-handed weapons. Hmm. You would think for them it would say one hand. Fill my tanks and shoot the shit. I thought you just said you were working. Make up for the last 2 days. Why does this keep doing this? It just keeps saying collected. Okay. It's just not showing up. And he's not picking it up either. Acting like Spotify. Guess it's bugged. That's so weird. It's just not picking it up. Hell, maybe it's just one of those days. Maybe people will be on in the evening or something. I was gonna get on at 1, but there was less people on at 1 o'clock. So, well, it's just me. I mean, we need 4 people. So, but I was gonna get on at 1, but there was less people on at 1 o'clock. I was like, well, maybe they're hiding, or I don't know. Sometimes just collectively everybody goes, not today. Not a big deal. I mean, most of the people are here 99% of the time, so every once in a while, there's a day like this. Probably should have just taken it off and streamed through the weekend anyway, but I don't know. I wanted to try. I don't know what to do. I'm not gonna pug. I'm not gonna pug. That's for sure. I don't know what to do.
Pen 15.
What's up?
NM. What's up with you?
You see it, man. Not a damn thing.
Where the duck is everyone XD.
Like I said, I mean, it's just probably one of those days where everybody's just kind of, we've been going fucking hard on keys, man. Like, really hard on keys. So, like, I get it. I get it. I'm right there too. Like, I don't really care if I play today or not, kind of thing. So I feel it. Guess I'll buy all these
We have been
mounts.
16 a day, I am pretty sure.
Doing a lot, yeah. I was gonna wait till 5. I kind of checked and I was like, man, there's still not a lot of people on. I was like, well, I'll put it on and kind of just wait around for an hour or so. But I mean, if I'm gonna do just like pug keys with my friends, then I'll cut the stream, and because I don't want to just sit here in silence, you know what I mean? Like, just rather just like cut all these lights off and the camera and the stream and everything, run whatever with some friends, and then just cut it on tomorrow, regular time. Fridays are usually pretty decent days. You just never know, but it doesn't really happen 2 days in a row, though. You got to say that. If we ever have a bad day, it's usually the next day is really good. So it could be that people just want to play this evening or something. So
Hey
maybe
homie, take a day off, you
like, much
always
later.
need a day, D.
Yeah, I wanted to give it a shot and just see. So, but we'll hang out for another little bit and just kind of see how it goes. And I did get a couple of DMs from people that popped their head in the stream but didn't say anything, and they were like, "Hey, I'm not gonna be on today." It was Neela and Bird and stuff. They were just saying, "Hey, we're not gonna be around today." I don't know the LFR.
I am watching anime and chilling out today.
Yeah, that's understandable. That's understandable. At least I can always count on you guys being around, you know? And then the Spotify being broken, and for some reason, whenever I click on this chest to finish my monthly, I can't. Like, what? There's weird stuff happening today. Look, it just doesn't show up, right? See my wrist? It says golden mobile timepiece, and there's nothing there. Now look, it just keeps picking it up. See, it's not there. Watch, the thing will close. I'll click it again. It keeps saying I collected it, but it's not in my bags. It's not. It's the dude. My computer's trying to be like, yo, you don't need to be in front of the computer right now. Watch, like a boulder. It's gonna come. A boulder? A meteor? A boulder of the sky is gonna come crashing down and land right here in this chair. My computer's like, go away, get out of here. Spotify not working is crazy. I'd show it to you guys, but, well, actually, I can pull it up on the other computer. Here, I can pull it up on this computer. Keep forgetting I have it on this computer. Installing Spotify. What the hell? Maybe there's an update, but this thing should be updating.
Leedle.
Let's see if it works here. Nope. Nope, it's doing the same thing. It's not giving the little message, though. It's like stopping itself from playing. So you press play, and then it starts to play, and then stops. But this one's not giving the message. The other one says, it has a message, says, Spotify is not available right now.
Before I get hyper chilled out in
Anyway.
a massive blizzard that is going to freeze Kansas City up and half the US
Yeah, what's
with
the
it
deal
talking
with that?
minus 50-degree
Hey,
temps
Form.
in places.
What's the deal with that? Just a huge, massive winter storm up there. It was on the radio that they like
Meanwhile, it's
canceled
60
like
here
some
in
football
OK.
game or something like that. So they're gonna do the football game in like Indianapolis. I don't know. I don't know who the teams were or whatever. They were talking about canceling them because of the winter storm.
Polar vortex. It's a massive polar vortex.
As far as I know, it's warm here. I don't know what the. Let me see what the temperature is. Probably
okay, we'll
in
be
the
frozen
70s
to just
if
wait
I had
for.
to guess. No, it's 63.
Guess I
Says
gotta go
tomorrow it's
bother
going to be
Kuza since he's
77
in
degrees.
Kansas City.
We're going to be in the 70s all weekend, all the way to Tuesday. And then it drops back down to the 60s. What you doing for? Ain't nothing going on. We're just hanging out for a little bit. Storm. Yeah, I'm gonna try to clean up the rest of my goal this weekend. That's it for the month there. And yeah, I was planning on streaming through the weekend. Maybe I don't know if on Saturday it'd be better to stream in the evening on Saturday.
I gotta wait till Sunday for it to even look like it's going to snow. Also nothing, I just woke up and for some reason hella groggy right now, so I'm just chilling hoping Red Bull wakes me up.
Yeah, I kind of went back to I guess I was asleep. And I went laid back down too after I cut everything on at 1, but there was like nobody online. So I was like, I'll just wait a couple hours. Just one of those days. Did you ever get that gold horsey mount? Oh, you mean the that Legion class mount or whatever? No, I have not had the time. I've been raiding in the evenings and stuff. I gotta sit and figure out what it is I'm supposed to do next. There's all this like meta achievement, and you have to do all these different quest lines.
You wanna do some mount runs?
Sure. So, like, each one of these is like a quest chain. So I started working on this begin construction one, and then it just stopped out of nowhere. And it didn't give me like, I'll go to this place to, to keep the quest going. Like, it just didn't give me any information. Like, it basically just wants you to do all of the questing out in Legion. So it's a lot. But they warned me. That's what they were saying when I mentioned it. They were like, that's a lot of quests. It's not going to be no one night thing. The roaming horse in the grave zone in Shadowlands.
Yeah, like I said, it's a meta achieve. Was a lot easier to get done back when it was current, than doing it years later. And once you get to the later steps, it gets somewhat time-gated from currency drops. It's like a death charger or something. I have it.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. That's in the mall, isn't it? It's just like a rare that like spawns and runs around the map or something.
Yeah, in the moor, he runs almost the whole zone. Yep. That's the exact one.
I like killed that thing like twice or something. I would go out there and periodically check for it, and it was never up or anything, so I just kind of like left that one alone. But you just have to kind of like run around looking for it or something. Just run around in a giant circle.
Fallen Charger is its name, and I used to find groups in the Pugger's custom tab of groups just camping him, waiting on him. But that was in Shadowlands, but yeah, just run around or chill there. He does run up to that spawn where you port back to Oribos. I'd kiff the Pugger will have one for it now, since I used to do that back in Shadowlands and got it during Shadowlands.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remember where it usually spawned at. Wasn't it? Was it over here somewhere? I remember it was like up on a hill. No, it's over here somewhere. It was in like the Night Fae. I wonder if people still camp this or.
No clue lol, I killed him near the Oribos portal, he just happened to be there when I joined the group, And yeah, people 100% still camp it. I'm sure that's what that dude on his Kyrian mount that ran past you earlier when you got out there is looking for it too.
I remember I think it's up here is where it spawns. I think it spawns over here in this area. Let me turn on that add-on. It would be NPC scan, right? Where is NPC scan? Rare scanner, I guess. I don't know. That one doesn't seem like one that would be.
Silver Dragon or NPC scan. Silver Dragon would have a more updated spawn icons on the map.
Which one? Silver Dragon? Okay. Hey, Moose. Fallen Charger. Yeah, it does. It spawns right up here. Last seen, never. Yells, runs from its spawn point to Korthia, then despawns.
Silver
I really
Dragon
have a
just has more
quest for them.
clean map icons, and more often than not they are closer to the exact spawn spots than Rare Scan does.
Yeah, well, I guess that's the spot. I remember coming here a few times, but like I would sit around and wait and just nothing would happen. So I'd just end up leaving after I get 2 hours.
This rare spawns around very rarely, but around every 4 hours on average.
Per hour spawn time. Yeah. Yes, I'm sure this was probably why I just kind of gave up on it.
So 2 hours might just not have been long enough, lol.
4 hours is too long, though. I would never camp anything for that long.
Try 8
That's
lol.
so long. Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. I would watch it. I would have it on the other monitor, and I'd be like watching something. And then if I got through a whole movie, I'd be like, and it still hadn't spawned, I'd be like, all right, I am done. What do you want to do? You want to go to ICC?
That's what I do camping TLPD, watching a movie, then another one. I tend to pick longer movies, or YouTube, and yeah, quirks. Sorry, was on Druid checking if I got outbid on a unclaimed box.
What's up, zombie slime? Yeah, so I got a few questions for Celtic with that the sales or whatever that I did one last night. I made 22,000 gold. But the guys, like, they made us join a voice or whatever, and the guys in the voice were saying that most of the keys that, okay, hold on a second. First of all, the lady or person that was putting together the groups, their name was Aussie Chick, and she said that all of the keys that she posts are oceanic. And then the guys in the group, because I tried to do one and the latency was just so bad. I mean, we ended up timing, it was just an 18. We ended up timing it and everything. But the guys were saying that, I said, look, guys, this is my first time. Like, I didn't realize that this was an oceanic. And he was, one of the guys was from NA that like played on oceanic servers or something. And he was saying that like they were saying that most of them were oceanic, but you could, like, if there was like a majority NA people in the group, that they could like reform the group and have one of the NA people form the group or whatever. So like ultimately the question is like, is that community just like just oceanic? Because, like, that's a huge problem for healers more than anybody. Probably tanks, too. But I asked the lady when I got out of it, because I had to, like, message her and say, like, hey, I didn't realize this was Oceanic and everything. And she said that all of her posts, hence the name Aussie Chick, is that she's building groups on the Oceanic servers. So, like, they have a really cool system down, though. I mean, you literally just sit there and wait for the DBM to alert you, and then just type in your little code or whatever, you know, healer, priest, NK, or whatever it is, and really cool system. So I gotta figure out, like, is there a channel that's like more for NA or what? Because, like, I would love to do more of them, but I can't have that latency. It was terrible. It was awful. I would cast something like an instant and it would take like 3 or 4 seconds before it actually casted. The guy we were carrying like died like 50 times. Like, he died so much, but he was really, really, really squishy. He was just getting popped, but it was 2 shots, and I could have saved him a bunch of times if I didn't have the latency issues. Hello.
They need to have someone set up NAR groups TBH.
Yeah, so has Bird mentioned that at all? The guys were saying that they were like, yeah, we play DPS, so it's not a big deal for DPS. You can just teleport.
Yeah, he had
for
the
I'll do
issue
this
on his runs
battle
last
real
night
quick
as well.
Okay. Well, I will have to look into it. The only thing that she really said was if there was a majority
For
NA,
falls are no save
then
phase.
she would, it could be requested that she run it on NA servers or whatever. So I'm just curious if there, because she was the only one posting keys. I was wondering if there was anybody on the NA servers doing it. The guys were saying there's not a lot of NA advertisers and stuff, is what they were saying. They were good too, man. They were like 3,300 IO. They're sending people that are 3,300 IO to do 18s. That's crazy. Like, you get priority, obviously, for having the higher IO. But if you're running people through lower keys, it seems like they should grab those people, you know, that, like, you could make everybody happier that way. And then just save the big IOs for like 20s and up. But like, probably 20 people applied, and they took the best out of those 20 people.
The higher IO, the more likely you'll get into lower ones. Most communities also require that you have a set level across all of your gear. That's just how they do it.
I mean, it works out for me. It just kind of sucks for other people. But if I would have been able to stay for all of those keys, I would have made like 88 or 80, 87K or something like that for doing 3 18s. But I couldn't stick around after that. And obviously the first one we did was EB too. So I was having to catch the, there's big pack pulls and you gotta be able to dispel and manage the heals because you only have your mass dispel every 2 minutes, and there's like several back-to-back gigantic pulls. So I did pretty decent for the latency being so bad. You gotta be fucking shitting me. What? Oh, don't run towards the wall on the elevator. Jesus Christ.
Test? Is there no audio?
No, Spotify's down.
Oh, you were just so quiet and no in-game sounds. I thought my stream was bugged.
Mm-mm. Don't do game sounds. They bother people when they're when we're running, because they hear my noises and they have to mute the stream. So we haven't done game volume for a couple years. See if Spotify's working yet.
Anyway, just popping in to say hi and support. Going to bed, gonna leave a stream up.
Still down. Yeah, well, have a good one, man. There's nothing going on today. You ain't missing nothing. Here you go. There you go. There's some game sounds for you. Think. Capture card does not monitor anymore. It's so weird. The capture card just doesn't monitor. Are the game sounds coming through now? Can anyone hear any kind of game sounds from the stream? Anything at all? I don't know. It says it's monitoring an output. I don't know. I don't know. No one knows. Gonna be quiet. Um, guess WAD. I'm gonna call it here in a little bit. I was just gonna give it an hour to kind of see. Um, and with stuff not working, with the music not working and stuff too. Just not a day for streaming. I wonder why it doesn't monitor the capture card anymore. OBS is just so crazy. It loves to just like stop doing stuff, but like it's working though. There's nothing coming through the monitor. So strange.
WoD could have been such a fun X-Pack.
Yeah. Why did people dislike it so much? Because Legion was so good.
The lack of content after a while, and just the amount of scrapped content like most X-Packs, but a lot of the scrapped content for WoD was what people wanted, over the stuff we got pretty much. The Lodge didn't help.
Wait a minute.
I'd too much about it. I was still pretty young for WoD, so I don't know exactly all the stuff. I just remember a lot of people like the launch, yeah, and that the garrison wasn't like what everyone expected or Blizzard chose to word it till it came out. And Asher and I know a lot of people didn't like how that turned out.
I know all about that. The wording or whatever. I remember they worded one of the blue posts so
Like
vaguely that it was oh gosh, it was who was the bad guy, Black Dragon, that was helping Sylvanas? Was it Neltharion? There was like a patch, and then Blizzard ended up saying later that they didn't mean for that quest to be available. Like, everybody thought we were getting something and that we had to do this quest line first. So everybody did it, and it, like, I want to say we, like...
LOL sounds like Blizzard.
I can't fucking remember, man. I can't remember all the little fine details. But, like, we were all talking about it. Like, everybody was ready for it and everything, and then everybody did the quest, and then, like, nothing happened after the quest. And everybody was messaging Blizzard, like, what are we supposed to do now? Like, we did the starter quest or whatever, and then Blizzard was like, oh, that's not supposed to be in the game yet. That's supposed to come out next patch. So then they, like, made the quest to where you couldn't do the quest anymore, but, like, half the population already did it already, and it was weird. And I remember everybody was just kind of sitting around going, like, so it's not this patch? Like, so we just basically had, like, nothing to do. We had all this stuff planned, and yeah, I know that was a vague explanation, but I just can't remember all the little fine details of it. But it was because of that. It's because they worded it all weird in the blue post.
WoD, to say the least, was a clusterfuck compared to a lot of other X-Packs. Then when the patch released, if you did the quest you couldn't do the campaign quests they wanted you to do.
I have to watch that later. I don't have
Terry's a little vid maybe to have as background about WoD lol.
yeah, we could actually I could play it over here, I guess.
Warlords of Draenor.
Here is a little song I wrote. I want to sing it note for
Whenever
note.
something bad happens in World of Warcraft, generally they'll use Warlords of Draenor as a measuring stick. To say, sure, this new feature is kinda bad, but it's not as bad as the
Now, why can't I hear that? Output device, Corsair, certified.
We could hear it lol.
not as bad as this thing from Warlords of Draenor. And to an extent, it deserves
They
some of
always
that
so
criticism.
quiet.
Blizzard
Why are these
themselves
videos
called it
always so quiet?
for the expansion. But was it really that bad? When Warlords of Draenor first launched, you might be surprised to hear that it set records for returning players. There was almost nothing but positivity about the expansion online, once people were able to play the game anyway. Although rocky launches aren't exclusive to Warlords of Draenor. So why were people so jazzed about the expansion?
Watch the
first?
Super Bowl live.
Let's dissect the questing
maybe
real
the Super
quick.
Bowl is what they were talking
WoD
about.
had this system called Draenor perks, where when you were leveling up, every 2 levels or so, they would just give you a boost to one of your main damage dealing abilities, or just something that you use all the time. For Shadow Priests, they would get a perk that allowed their Mind Flay to channel 33% faster, which is just straight up a damage boost to one of their main filler spells. They also received a feature which enhanced Shadow Orbs, which was actually a pretty big deal for DPS back then, because it meant it was much harder for them to cap their main resource. They were also given the ability to generate that resource with another skill, and allowed to use their main defensive cooldown more often. MM Hunters received a base bonus to their focus by 20. Survival Hunters got a straight up 1 second increase to their explosive shot, which is huge for their main damage dealing ability at the time. Mages got a speed boost after using Blink. Arcane Mages got a buff to the Arcane Blast, which allowed them to cast it faster every time they gained a stack. Basically, every class and spec received huge boosts to their
No,
damage
it's
or
the Kansas
utility
City
while
Chiefs
leveling
versus
up,
Miami
and got to
Dolphins
keep
game
these
where
boosts
the
for the
Timps are
entire
going to be
expansion.
Timps in the
So
negatives.
it was one of the last expansions where your
Tag it
character
for.
actually felt stronger as they leveled up, rather than
I'm glad only one of us has to
the zones
tag it.
themselves
Jeez.
also contributed to this. Every single zone in Warlords of Draenor had the very specific zone perk. And when you started off in Frostfire Ridge or Shadowmoon Valley, you would get a specific ability.
Yeah,
that
yeah, I
only
got
worked
credit.
inside the
Apparently,
zone
only
that
one
you
of us has to
controlled.
tag it,
And
so
the default one you got allowed you
that's
to
the
basically
second
summon
time
a
I've not
small army
tagged
to
it.
help you fight
I was
something.
getting ready to position
When you moved over
myself
to
too.
Gorgon, they would let you choose between 2 abilities. One of them allowed you to summon a mech suit that was actually very effective at mowing down ads, and even gave you the niche ability to fly.
I
for
wonder
a
if
short
it's
amount of
is
time.
better just to
It
be
was
down
a huge,
here.
legitimate DPS increase to
me.
be able to use the Mech Shredder 5000. But
That
it
thing
was
drops
only available
so
to this
fast.
one zone. You also had access to the Champion's Honor, which would summon a champion to help fight for you, and then give you a buff after he went away in a minute, which would be stronger based on how many enemies you killed while the ad was out. In the Spires of Iraq, you had the option between picking an extra Hearthstone with a reduced cooldown that also increased your experience gain by 20%, or a rare NPC vendor who you could summon every 10 minutes, which would sell you a whole bunch of buff items that would directly increase your damage. Almost everyone picked the Hearthstone because of the increased XP, but both of them were great options to pick. And the extra Hearthstone combined with the extra XP made Spires of Iraq one of the fastest leveling zones. In Talador, you had the option between 2 different DPS cooldowns. One of them would summon a Guardian Orb that would come out to electrocute enemies, and the other one was 3 Charge Artillery Strike, which was off cooldown enough where it was basically part of your rotation by the end of the zone. In the Grand, you have the option to pick either a siege engine you could
2
summon
quantum
once every
courses
10
was cool
minutes, just
yesterday.
like the mech suit from
Last key of the
Gorgon,
day.
or you could pick a mount that you could ride in combat. One of them is a temporary cooldown DPS boost.
I was
The
riding
other
around
one
on
is
midnight
such
last
incredible
night, just looking
convenience,
at
I'm
it.
sure many people wish they could have it as a default option for leveling. So when it came to the actual combat,
That's
and
one I've
leveling in the
always been
zone,
extremely
getting a whole
slack
bunch of really
on
strong
farming
abilities that
is
you leveled up
midnight.
as well
I
as
would go
getting
do it
really
like
strong
once
zone
a month.
abilities really made the
And
leveling a lot more
you ain't
fun
gonna get
from
it if you
just a
do it like
gameplay
that.
point of view. They really knocked out
You're
the park with
lucky.
just giving you fun things to do that you're basically only going to use while leveling. And I'm not sure why they didn't follow up and try to do this again, outside of what they did with the Covenant abilities. But honestly, all of the Covenant abilities are very
I
tame
farmed
compared
Midnight
with the
Morrow, then
Zone
I made
perks
myself run
Although it
ICC
wasn't
of
just
Tear
the
a
player's
while,
power
was
while
a shorter
leveling.
run
Sure,
Lamau.
you were really strong while leveling in Warlords of Draenor, but also
Mhm,
Warlords
yeah, it
really
was a
went
short
all out
run,
with
too.
treasures and introducing the bonus objective system. Where while you're randomly questing, you'll get a bonus objective that pops up, and if you complete it, it will just give you a crap ton of experience. It was so much experience that you could skip leveling normally and just do bonus objectives. Same with treasures. There was a whole bunch of treasures littered throughout all of the zones. And while the treasures themselves only gave minor
no.
cosmetic
You said the
items or a
green
little
one is the
garrison
one that I'm gonna
resources,
buy with time
they would
walking, but
also give
that
you about
black
as
one
much
right
experience
there
as completing a quest before Blizzard nerfed them later.
can be farmed, right?
Warlords of Draenor was the
Thundering
fastest
Onyx
old
Cloud
expansion
Serpent.
to level through because you could just skip traditional leveling entirely.
I'm trying to remember what I've
by
asked you
just
about that
collecting
one
treasures
before, and you
bonus
told me. I
objectives.
just can't
And
remember.
that was on top of the leveling itself also being excellent. Now, I know Warlords of Draenor gets lots of
Yeah,
crap for
green
some
one
of
is
the
time
worst
walking,
grinding of all
that
the
black one is the rare out in
and for
time
how
Oh,
the
yeah.
signs, remember
Yep,
that
yep,
rare spot,
yep.
yeah.
But these were both
That's right.
actually really good at the start. While you first build up your garrison, you could recruit followers that would help you out for missions out in the open world. And since the original soft cap was around 20 followers, that meant you had to go out and collect a lot of different people in order to hit that first soft cap.
Speaking
And
of
most the creatures
followers,
you would find out in the
you know
open
the
world
bot
that just
system
help
that's
with
in
side
the
quests,
private servers,
which
they brought
really
that
gave
over
you a lot
to
more of an incentive to want to
the
do
retail.
side quests.
So like
Because there wasn't
normal
always an option
dungeons,
that
just
would bring
normals for
followers.
now, but you know they're
And
just
since you
testing
needed
it.
so many of them,
Like, it's
more than
coming.
half the time
We're
it was
eventually
the
going to be
follower you could
botting
recruit.
like Mythic
I don't think WoW
Zeros
has
and
really
shit.
incentivized doing side quests as much as Warlords of Draenor did.
Be able to take bots
because
with
they
you on
let you
the
either a new follower for your garrison, a huge amount of extra experience with the side objectives,
on normal
or
runs.
just
So
a
you don't have to have
normal
real
big amount
people.
of experience for finding
That
a
same
treasure.
exact system they're using
Even
on the
doing a
private
little
servers.
puzzle that was
They're copying a
required
lot
to
from the
get to
private
most of the
servers. I think they're
levels.
learning from
And then
them.
there was also the story.
They got
which
some
was
pretty cool
actually
stuff.
pretty
Delves.
good in the leveling experience. Warlords was the only expansion that had full cinematics for every zone, and some of them were very
Hey, Crit.
iconic and memorable to this day, especially the ending to Nagrand.
Have you been in
which had
LFG
Thrall
for
and Geralt fight
KSM?
each other. It's probably
basically
one
are
of the most
bots? Oh,
well-known
yeah.
and loved in-game cinematics, and it was shown at the
Yeah,
end of a level.
It's I'm real
There's also the
familiar
whole
with that
story
system. I got
Gnar,
bots on my
where for the
private
horde
server,
questing for Frostfire Ridge, you go around helping out.
and
Durin
they
Than's
works
brother,
great
who is
too.
the
Like
Uncle Thrall.
they'll play just
And
like
throughout
regular
the
players.
zone,
They'll
he'll
buff
come
you.
in and
They'll
help you fight back
resurrect
the
you if you
Horde.
die.
And he does such a successful
They'll
job at it
cast
that he thinks
they'll
he
cast all their
should be the one that
spells. The
leads
tanks will
Frostfire
tank. The
clan.
healers will
So
heal. Like
halfway through the zone story,
they work
he
really
goes up
well.
to Durin and challenges him to a mock Gara in order to be the new chieftain.
That's gonna be
And
for like
instead
super
of Durin
casuals.
getting mad at him or just talking him out of
I
it
don't think
peacefully, and saying, "We're
nobody
brothers,
that's
we shouldn't
really
be
good
fighting,"
runs
or
normals.
something else cliche. What he actually does is
Unless you
he
absolutely
just
have to. I guess you could
throws
say at
down
the
his
beginning of an
weapons
expansion,
and
yeah,
walks up to
you'd be
him
running some
and
normals then.
basically just tells him to do it. He just says, if you want to be
Yeah,
war chief so bad,
yeah, you're right.
just
I
kill
think
me.
if
but see
if
how
it
many
works
people
like
follow you
the
after you kill your brother in cold blood. And since Gnar
like the
wasn't
private servers,
expecting
then
this, like, at all,
they'll
he just put the
they'll
weapons
go
away and
wherever
says,
you
"Damn,
go,
son,
but
that's not
you
how it's
can
supposed to go
typically
down.
like
Okay, fine, you're the
ping
chieftain."
a mob and
he
then the
begrudgingly
tank will
follows
go and
Durotar for the
attack
rest
that
of the
pack.
zone, where
So
you
like if
go
like if
around
you're a
trying to
healer or
clean up
something
the
like that,
third
that way you're
oldest
not the
brother's
first one that
mess,
runs in and
as he's
attacks
the one
anything.
who's
You
leading
can
the Iron
ping,
Horde in the area.
and then the
At
tank will just
very
run
end of
over
the
there
quest line in
and
the
start
zone,
fighting.
The Iron Horde is about to send their army through a passage in order to help reinforce in the final battle. The Frostwolf clan is incredibly outnumbered, and it was crazy for them to want to fight back in the first place. So they try to tactically have one of their legendary shamans, Drekthar, basically collapse the valley, which would allow them to clean house on the
Me and
other
Four were out
side
here
with
one
limited
day,
numbers,
and we had what was
basically
it? What do you
take the
think?
area
Four,
for
probably at
themselves
least
before
20.
reinforcements could find another
We
one.
had a
However,
long
the men
string
that
of
were
serpents,
getting
and
real
everybody was
close
on a
to the
different
shaman in
one.
order to stop this whole
I
fight from
didn't even know there was that
happening.
many
And the
freaking
Frostwolf
serpent
were
mounts,
losing men very
cloud
quickly.
serpents or whatever they
So
are.
Durotar knew the only
Look
way
at
for
the
them to win
screenshot
was
I
if he
sent
took
for
a
it,
small
lol.
group of their most elite soldiers to just basically stall for time.
Oh
But
yeah, I'd
at
have
the
to go
cost
back
of
in the
dying
logs.
along
You
with the
screenshotted
Rockfords.
it.
And
It was a
Gnar
lot
held
of
him back
people.
and just runs in by himself. And then the cinematic for the zone plays.
It was pretty cool though. I love it when they do that, or when everybody gets on the same mount and they make a chain.
Can't win, which won them the battle ultimately when they successfully collapsed the valley on top.
I'm gonna give this one a 4 if
This
it
zone
does
has
drop for
one
me.
of
Imagine it
the
dropping
best
twice.
Moments of character writings I've seen. It goes from you having to
I mean, it's
rescue Gunnar
possible.
when you
It
shove him
happens.
in an Iron Horde prison, to watching him challenge his brother to a death duel, to seeing him give up his life in order to save him instead. And I was so impressed by this story that I even made a video about Gunnar back in Warlords of Draenor, specifically to share with everyone else who might have missed it. It's not an exaggeration to say that the leveling in Warlords of Draenor was the best new content expansion leveling we've ever gotten. It set the
I got a
peak
cache,
for
but
how
no
to start
goodies.
off the new expansion. And just like how the Timeless Isle set the standard for how to create a new
Do you already
zone
have the
expansion,
Elegon mount?
it basically
Or-
did everything right. It provided multiple
I think she
avenues to
has
level
that
up your
one
character
already.
and gave you a
Can't
whole
remember.
bunch of strong new abilities that you could use just long
You
enough
have
to
that one,
like
yeah.
them, but then giving you a new one immediately to play with. It
Where do we
increased the
normally
power
go
level of
after
your
this?
character,
Let's see, we already did the
encouraged
Phoenix,
exploration
we
with how much
did
experience the treasures
ICC.
gave and how almost all the side quests would award
Where do
a
we normally
follower,
go after this?
and had interesting stories to tell. There's also the story of Ishkar and the Spires of Iraq, the story with Velen and Shadowmoon, and the story of Murad and Talador, all of which topped off with full-length
We've got a
cinematics at the end.
Nixia.
You can see why there was nothing but positive words to be
Firelands,
said about
that's
the leveling
it. Yeah,
experience in Warlords of Draenor.
Firelands for sure.
But that's
Final
not the
answer.
only thing they did right.
And I'm
While
glad I got
Warlords of
these
Draenor only had 3
Orgrimmar
raids
capes.
in the entire expansion. 2 of the raids are some of the best raids we've ever gotten. Even the 3rd raid, High Mall, was also a good raid.
Thundering
But if you
Ruby,
were to
yeah,
ask me
that
my
one you can
absolute
buy
favorite
it.
raid in WoW's
You can
history
buy
that
that
I've
on the
personally
auction
done,
house. Now
I would
it
probably
was
have to say
10,000
Blackrock
gold,
Foundry,
which is that's a
the
pretty
second
decent
raid
price.
released in WoD.
And I didn't
Blackrock
buy one
Foundry
because I
did
was
something
broke at the
that no
time, but
other
now I'm
raid
not
has done
broke anymore,
since.
so
They went ham
I
on
might
unique
buy
boss
me a
fights.
Thundering
Hans and Franz is still wholly unique
Red
in its
Cloud
belt
Serpent.
mechanic, where basically you're fighting 2 bosses at the same time. And while you're fighting them, you're in a
I always
room when
forget
you have a
about
constant
Firelands.
conveyor belt
I
going
need
back
both
and
of the
forth.
mounts in
On the
Firelands.
conveyor belt, there's stamps that will occasionally
That's another
come
one I
down
went for
and either
years.
damage you on lower difficulties.
I'll check
or
that one
instantly
second
kill
for.
you
Let me
on
get
higher
to my
ones.
spot
And
real
while there
quick.
were little sections of the
The
fight
auto
where you could
flight,
stand
flight.
still and not be on the conveyor
Auto
belt,
flight.
occasionally void zones would come out and would force you to get on the anyway.
Can you now? It used to be you have
There's even a
to be in
section
the
of the fight
party.
where you basically just have to do the
Yeah.
safety
Double
dance
check it. Are
and
you in the
just
game
move
right now? Or
out
are you
of the
working? I
press
can check
while
for
the
you.
Conveyor belt's still going back and forth.
Um,
There's also Org
but yeah,
Order, which
that
had
one
you
I
fight in a
believe
little
is
maze.
bind on
Periodically throughout
equip
the fight,
now.
You would just start rolling around, which made the entire raid have to run around the little maze.
'Cause,
and DPS
Penguin
crates
bought it.
so that he would
Penguin
keep
bought it
people
out of the
in
auction
them
house.
And the phase and go back to another boss
Where are we
fight.
going again? Yeah,
This is another
Firelands.
fight which is wholly unique, as you had to split up the raid in order to run around and DPS all the crates, and of course avoid the bosses
33K
rolling
on the
around
auction
and
house,
kill
okay.
you, so that you could have
Yeah,
enough
that
in order to end
surprised
the
me, that
phase before he
inflation.
rolled over and just killed everyone. Blackhand himself, the final boss, was also pretty unique for the time. While the fight itself was pretty generic, they did have a gimmick to the fight where every phase of the fight happened
Well,
on a
do the
different
skip
level
with
of
the
boss room.
feathers.
Phase 1 would be on the top
Say
level. When you
phases.
transition,
You wanna try
he would
it?
just break the floor and take you to the second level.
You good
Once
with
the second
that?
phase is over, he would break the floor again and take you to the bottom level, where you
Yeah.
had to deal with knockback mechanics. that
we
could
have to kill
instantly
that
kill you if you
boss.
fell off into the lava.
Don't you have to bug
And it
that
was
boss?
such a
Bird
love
and
final
I did
boss
it
fight.
last
Oh, you
night.
already
It
did
was
it?
kind
Okay.
of softly copied
It's
again
very
for Council
easy.
Nathria. And Blackhand was appropriately difficult in its hardest difficulty, being one of the hardest boss fights of all time in its Mythic mode. And then there's everyone's favorite boss fight of the expansion, Operator Thogar, where you would fight him in a room with 4 train tracks, and periodically throughout the fight, trains would just come out and kill anyone that was in its path. And sometimes trains would come and stop in order to deposit ads at you to fight.
Oh, is
And
that the
basically,
picture?
the entire fight was just
There you
dodging
go.
trains
There's
and
the
killing
chain
ads
right
that
there.
came from those
Nope,
trains.
let her
And if you didn't
spawn.
kill them
She
fast
shits
enough,
the
then too
feathers
many
out,
trains would come in
pick
and
up
kill
3
you while you were
each,
trying to
then
get the
kill
others to
her in
run
the
away.
air, and
Now,
quickly
unique
fly
boss
across.
fights can be
Just
a
follow
good
me and
or
it'll be
bad.
fine lol.
People
Okay.
complain a lot
Just
about
be
Hans
ready
and
to
Franz
slow
for giving
fall
them motion
yourself.
sickness, which is probably why they never did something like that again. But Blackrock Foundry was a testament to creative
I
boss
can do that.
mechanics. I don't think a raid has really matched Blackrock Foundry's level of just pure amount of unique fights since. And the thing is, the raid after, Hellfire Citadel, was also a top tier raid.
Yeah,
Just
you can
wait
skip
a
to
second. Don't
Ragnaros.
start
You can
the
just do
boss.
the mount. Oh, I won't.
Complicated fight
You
mechanics
can
that
just
we've
you,
ever
Who's
done.
still
you
heading
can
there,
just
lol?
And they
do
were
the
so
mount bosses. That's what I'm trying to
complicated
say.
because add-ons at the time
You go
allowed
the-
them to
the-
show
the
you a lot
mount
more
bosses.
information inside of raids than they do today. I still have some footage from back in the day when we were doing Mythic Cormrock, where there was
Don't
a
mind
phase
me,
where
I'm
everyone in
just
the raid had to run
riding
to
your
a
boss.
specific assigned void zone in order
Wish-
to soak.
I wish it
And
was
then when you would
bigger.
deal this mechanic was just to have an add-on to literally.
I need that
Yeah,
toy
it's
that makes me
actually really
big.
easy,
I
lol.
never have gotten a toy that makes me big.
was set
I'm
up
always
before the
jealous
fight
when you guys
started.
become monsters.
During the final fight with Archimond, there was a mechanic where it shoot lasers through people.
We just
where you
don't
only
kill
wanted
her
the
right
lasers to
away.
go through the 2 people selected.
It's on
So you had
10-man
to coordinate
heroic.
yourself
That's
in a
okay,
way So
right?
it would only pass through those 2 people and not anyone else.
You
And
can
Mythic
do,
difficulty,
apparently
this
you can
Just
do
get one
Firelands
enemy
on
and buy the
normal
toy.
You had to
and
coordinate the
hard.
entire raid in
Ike.
order to not allow a
But
single laser to
I
go
don't
over
know
the
if the
hidden
mounts
ones, which was basically a
drop
conquest to an
from
atom.
normal.
There's also Shadow Lord Ishkar, which had a mechanic where you had to throw
Because I
around
remember
an
they were
item
saying you
that
could do
gave
it for
an
the
extra action
achievements.
button in
Let's see,
order
is
to
it on
interact with all
heroic
the mechanics
there?
in the fight.
Let's go
While it may
normal,
not be as good
loot.
as Blackrock Foundry,
Yeah,
it
it's
was
just...
still
I
also
think
excellent.
25, but
Smoldering
normal
egg.
and heroic does count.
Okay, so it doesn't drop the Razageth version, the flying version, just the chicken.
Hellfire Citadel sense. But at the time, they weren't
Oh,
that
no,
big
no,
of a
no, no,
deal
that
because
is the
of how
flying
great
mount.
add-ons were. And instead, they were just kind of well liked. And Archimon himself proved to be a huge
Maybe it
challenge
drops
in
on
the
both
final
for.
boss,
Maybe we should
as I
start
think
doing
it
on
took
normal
number
and
8 to my
heroic.
list of the hardest bosses of all time list. So, when it came to raid content, it was actually excellent. The reason the raids aren't talked about as much as some of the more iconic ones, like maybe Old War or ICC, is because the expansion itself has a negative rap, which means it's not a good idea to talk about the positive aspects.
Yeah, it'd be worth it to do it
because
on
talking
normal
about
and heroic
negativity just
then.
straight up gets more clicks and views than talking about positives.
That's cool.
Even if people did talk about the positives, they just aren't heard by as many people as all the negatives. And there's also lots of features that were introduced in WoD that many people still enjoy to this day. Warlords was the expansion that upgraded the Heirloom tab, which basically allows you to equip heirlooms on brand new characters without having to mail them. They also added a tab for toys and tabards, so you no longer need to hold them in your inventory. Warlords also improved the flight path. Before Warlords of Draenor, if you wanted to fly from one place to another, and there wasn't a connecting flight path discovered, then you would be unable to fly there until you got the connecting path. But with WoD, they made it so even if you did not have the connecting flight
it
path,
does.
you could still fly to the path you did have. And with the new stop flight button, a button so
do you
useful,
want
they
to
even
do
added
do
it to
25
the
just
No
in
Changes
case?
classic
I'll come
now.
back out.
This button appears when you get on a flight path.
It
and when
should
clicked,
be on
automatically
25,
cancels your
man,
flight,
already.
causing you to stop
Like, I
flying
didn't
wherever
change
you're
it.
going and land at the
Raid
next stop
difficulty,
you
yeah.
have to.
Okay, it's
Forgot to get something
automatically
to bank
putting
your
us in
flight?
10
Well,
man
go
for.
back. No longer have to wait for your entire flight to finish. They also added a thing called mercenary mode. See, sometimes one faction has way more players than the other in PvP, and because of this, that one faction has
Yeah, it's
insanely long
forcing it.
PvP queues. So Merc mode allowed players
That's
of the
fine. There's
opposite
another dungeon
faction
that
to
does
kill
that
the
too.
PvP member of the other
Or
faction
unless I'm just thinking
in
of
a
this
way
one.
to help reduce queue times. This feature was so well liked that players have been asking for it to be usable in PvE modes as
We gotta
well,
ride
to
Razageth.
cut back on how horde-dominated high-level play is.
If
WoD was
really.
also when they updated character models from all the vanilla and TBC races.
Is it gonna keep me
These
in
models
combat
kept true to
now?
their original feeling while updating them into the new
no.
era.
There we go.
Bringing them up to
Good,
line with the
good.
more updated WoW art style. People like this change so much that they keep asking for Blizzard to update their character models with every new expansion.
Alright,
And
show
the
me how it's
biggest feature
done.
they added, Garrisons, was a light version of player housing that people have been asking for since day one. While it did not fulfill the role of player housing, it did allow for players to build their own, well, garrisons. A base they controlled what buildings got made, where they got placed, and where the buildings got various perks and buffs, like a portal to any zone you wanted, a faster mount speed, or being able to cut down trees or capture animals. And one of the things players liked was if you combo specific buildings together, you were able to get tens of thousands of gold a week on each character to build up a nice stockpile, simply by recruiting followers who had special traits that doubled gold for missions, and then sending 3 followers with the perk all
I'll
over
let
the
you do
gold
everything.
missions. And by doing the daily quests in some
So,
of the
but we
buildings,
need, do we
all of which
loot
could
her
be done in
first?
about 5 minutes per character, and was the easiest gold making you could possibly
Or we
do
come
in
back
any
and loot her or
expansion
something?
without having to sell stuff on the auction house. You know the weekly events we have in Modern WoW?
Okay.
Well, those were actually added with Warlords of Draenor and were called bonus events at first.
We can
These events
teleport
ran
back to
every
the
Friday
entrance
Monday
too.
and had all
Well,
sorts of
no,
boosts
never
in
mind,
them,
because
like
it wouldn't be
bonuses from
unlocked.
Dungeons, honor from battlegrounds and arenas, pet experience from pet
Where to
battles,
rock?
and bonus Apexis crystals later changed into world quests. It also had this fancy new thing added in Warlords of Draenor called time walking.
Mm-hmm.
Time walking allowed players at max
Take
level
3.
to scale down
Okay.
to heroic versions of old
Okay.
dungeons and later raids. It launched with Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King, and Cataclysm, filled with dungeons to do, with a currency called time
1,
badges that could be used to
2,
buy all sorts of
3.
stuff from toys, pets, transmog, and even rep from old expansions. And don't worry, by the way,
Fly,
the bonus
fly.
events were increased from just the weekend to all week to be the weekly events we have today. And the time walking currency introduced in this expansion
okay. I see. I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Is just as valuable
15,
as it was back then
14,
as it is today.
13.
So with all of these
Go!
great features of Warlords of Draenor,
We'll make it.
why does it go down as one
Oh
of the
yeah,
most
we're gonna make it.
infamous expansions?
Okay, so then
It doesn't have a
Sweet.
sub-progression system like
so we still
Adroit
gotta kill
Armor.
Major Domo.
It
Do
didn't
you
remove
need
the
this
old world
achievement?
like Cataclysm. It didn't
Oh,
introduce
no
a
Major
controversial
Domo.
race
Okay.
like the Pandaren. In fact, it just introduced a whole bunch of features that a lot of people really liked. It even had borrowed
No
power without
Major
anyone
Domo.
knowing it was borrowed power. And no one ever complains about the Draenor perks of Warlords of
Yes,
Draenor
it
when
was,
discussing
dude.
things
Firelands was like
Artifacts, the Heart of Azeroth,
Firelands
or
was
Covenants.
really good.
It seems to be one of the few
Great
expansions
mechanics.
that did borrow power from the
A
expansion.
cool story. The
It even had tier
graphics
set
got
bonuses.
upgraded. Like
And the final
Cataclysm
boss
was
would drop a
just.
trinket that was so impactful
I'll
to your
always
class
remember
that was basically
Kata
like
as
having a new talent. And some of those trinket
my
effects were so
favorite.
good they basically
As far
changed
as
your
I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I
entire
like Dragonflight.
rotation. So the gear in the expansion was good too.
Kato was just.
Yeah, one of the most infamous
game
moments
got
of
so
Warlords of
freaking
Draenor
awesome.
was definitely its patch 6.1.
I actually had my own raid team, my own 10-man raid team. I was the leader of it. They were the Deathlock was there.
It basically
He
just
remembers.
had a whole bunch of minor things, like the mentioned heirloom upgrade, a few things for garrisons, a couple
We
of
ended
toys,
up
and
going
Twitter
from just a
integration. It
ragtag
was
10-man
commonly
group where
memed that
they
this
had
was the
no
selfie patch.
leadership,
This
they
was
had
the
no
patch that
direction or
introduced the selfie
anything.
cam toy. Although what's
They were
largely
just like
forgotten when this
regular
patch was brought
raiders,
up
and then we
is the
ended up
fact that
getting
Blizzard had
a
stated
server
beforehand that with
first
Warlords of Draenor,
heroic
they wanted to go
rag.
back to naming minor patches after full numbers rather than as like 0.5.
And they were just
Normally, when they
they
had
were
a minor
just
patch,
they
would just
listened
add a
well.
0.5
If I
again to
called
whatever
something
the
out, they
current
just
patch was. So currently,
they
as of
listened.
making this video, Shadowlands is in its patch 9.0.5. And that's because
This
they did
boss was a
minor
lot
patch
of fun.
updates,
I
which
really,
added a
really
couple of new
enjoyed
features.
Ragnaros.
But nothing major.
You had to
like
wipe
any
to it a
raid
bunch
or
of times to
dungeon.
kind of like
If
get
Blizzard
all of
named
the
patch
mechanics
which
down, but
introduced the Valor
it
system
was crazy to
as
heal.
patch 9.1, for example, people would get really mad because they're used to numbered patches being big. As 9.0.5, no one cares about that. Patch 6.1 was them trying to go back to just naming content updates that don't have something major with just full numbers, as this is something they used to do in Vanilla WoW and the Burning Crusade. In the Burning Crusade, patch 2.2 was literally just
yeah,
adding
the
voice
Firelands
chatting
achievements are
integration.
really fun to
And
get.
a lot of the patches in
You
Vanilla
basically
WoW just
take
had
off
game
all your
updates,
gear
no real
except for your
content.
weapon.
As Vanilla
Just
WoW
leave your
ended off
weapon on.
patch
That gives you
1.6
just enough
WoW,
stats to
but didn't have
where you
above
don't
raid
one-shot
release,
stuff,
for
but
example.
you do
But
hit
since people
things
were
in like
so used to
10%
full numbered
chunks.
patches having a raid or something
So it
else
doesn't
major,
take forever to
there
kill
was
something,
a
but
huge backlash at them for
look,
daring to call it
see now
patch
it used to be a
6.1,
chest would
when
spawn.
all they did
You
was
didn't loot
consolidate
his
all the
body
heirlooms
back
into a
before. There'd be a
interface
chest that
that
spawned
could
right
be
here in the middle of the
players
room, and it was
and give
gigantic.
people the
It was a
selfie
huge chest.
Even though we had a full patch in the Burning Crusade which just added voice chat that no one used. That is to say, WoW fans did what they do
Heroic
best
is
and
body
basically
normal
blew
drops the
minor
chest?
complaints
Okay.
way out of proportion.
Yeah,
Where
that
it's
could have
still
been.
talked about as a bad part of Warlords of Draenor to this day. And because people freaked out so much about 6.1, Blizzard doesn't do that anymore. And more appropriately just adds one more decimal.
Yep, him walking
when
around.
they have a minor patch update, usually in the form of 0.5 patches. Another big complaint about Warlords of Draenor was the garrisons themselves. People really liked the garrisons for the first month while they were still questing through the excellent zones getting all the followers. But at a certain point, you were just kinda done. The garrisons were fun when you were advancing them, but you can completely max them out and finish the content in your garrison after about a month or two. And so once people hit this threshold, they were mad that the garrisons didn't do more. You could still do the dailies in your garrison every day in order to earn more gold without having to use the auction house than at any other point in WoW's history. But people really wanted more to do with the garrisons. And since they kind of hit the wall of available content for it pretty early, they instead got tired of it and just called it a bad feature. They also didn't like how major cities were unoccupied because everyone was just in their garrison. They made the garrisons really convenient for doing pretty much everything, as you could even get an auction house NPC in one of your garrison buildings. That there
Wanna run it
wasn't
on
really
normal?
a reason to visit
Might as well
major
while
cities
we're out
anymore.
here.
And so, with the combination of making it feel like the open world had less people in
It's
it,
some decent
and
gold
because they
here.
wanted
I mean,
more
if you run
cosmetic
all
options
the
for the
bosses,
garrisons,
I think you end up
they
making
kind
like
of turned against it midway through the
with
expansion.
selling all the items
There
and
was
everything.
nothing
It's
wrong with the
I
garrisons
want to say it's like
themselves,
close to
other than the
2,000
fact that They
gold.
were too useful. They provided
Maybe like
more in
15 to
herbs, so long as you
1,800
didn't
gold
mind
or
clearing
something
out
like
your herb
that.
garden
It's
or mine
decent. I
every
mean,
day.
it's not
You
like
didn't really need ore or
probably the
herbs
most
from auction
efficient
house.
thing in the
You
world,
just
but
get your own.
a little bit of gold.
There was even a building that allowed you to disenchant your gear, so you didn't need to be an enchanter. And it even had access to a bank, so you could just kind of have a mini city inside your garrison. And with how popular Classic WoW is, with how much people were excited about them taking away conveniences, basically the biggest sin of the garrison was just being a big convenience.
Oh, and transmogging came into the game in Cataclysm too. That was another really big.
To be more cosmetic
that was a big deal when that came out.
Having more say in the cosmetics than their pseudo players.
That was just something that the players had wanted for so long, because we looked like garbage before transmog.
That way,
everybody was wearing mismatched items and half a tier set, and just
there's also the endgame content in Warlords of Draenor.
We looked stupid.
Basically, the previous expansion, Mist of Pandaria, was chock full of daily quests.
Raid difficulty normal, and then let me reset.
With giving daily quests to basically every zone that you needed to accomplish in order to unlock the Valor vendors. And WoD was trying to rectify that problem by not requiring people to have to grind out dailies in order to unlock vendors that they needed for.
Well,
I like
do
the
the
skip,
same
though.
thing again.
And instead, you can do it for
I like that
basically
skip. That's really badass.
In fact, the reputations were just for cosmetics as well. And since the endgame daily system didn't force you to do it, a lot of people just never did it, and then complained that there was nothing to do. Even though the endgame of Warlords of Draenor was basically the same as every other expansion before it. It had raiding, dungeons, PvP, holiday events, challenge modes, gold making, pet battles. It just lacked mandatory daily quests, but still had daily quests as well. So that's why Blizzard decided to add the bonus events, which eventually became the weekly events. They did try to add new stuff, because it turns out people like to be told what to do, otherwise they just won't do anything. There was also the content drought of WoD, which was the worst ever content drought in the game's history, as they gave on the expansion halfway through to work on Legion. So, after the last patch of 6.2, there was a huge
Legion
gap before Legion finally came out. The thing is,
the GOAT expansion.
The gap was only about a week or two longer than the gap from Mist of Pandaria to Warlords of Draenor, and only a month longer than the gap from BFA to Shadowlands. The content drought was not really as long as it's remembered, because sure, it was technically the longest content drought in the game's history, but not by very much. Funny enough, counting the total boss counts of the 3 raids in Warlords of Draenor and comparing it to the boss counts of raids from other expansions, it actually has the second least amount of bosses total in an expansion, with Cataclysm actually taking the #1 spot at having the lowest boss count for its expansion, despite having 5 total raids. There's also the notion of cut content from the game, where they promised a lot more stuff with Warlords of Draenor and BlizzCon than what we actually got. But that's kind of true for a lot of other expansions as well. There isn't a single expansion that doesn't have a plethora of cut content. Even Vanilla WoW had a whole bunch of stuff planned. According to the WoW Diary book, they wanted to add Old Outlands, Northrend, the Emerald Dream, the Dragon Isles, and the South Seas of Kulturas and Zandalar with the base game, but they were all cut in development. They were just more open about planned content in Warlords of Draenor. And because of the backlash they received from not including some of the content they talked about, they just were more tight-lipped on what they were planning, just in case. For example, in BFA, when they were announcing a new patch, they basically only had a couple of screenshots of it for promotional material.
It's just a matter of time before we get wings on retail too.
Because of lack of info. But then they released
They'll copy private servers on that one as well.
They had the whole thing done and ready to go.
Hey,
they
Shreds.
were just so conservative about releasing any information that might possibly be cut, because they didn't want to repeat of Warlords of Draenor. So there were definitely some negative aspects.
We're just doing some mount runs, just hanging out.
They were heavily exaggerated and made to be much a bigger deal than they actually were. And a lot of the content in Warlords of Draenor was some of the best work they've ever done. It really is a gem of an expansion that had one too many scratches on its surface that people complained about until they looked like valleys. So, was Warlords of Draenor really that bad of an expansion? Not at all. It was one raid tier away from being one of the best. Was Battle for Azeroth really as bad as people remember? This is one of the few expansions that was universally hated for a ton of reasons. However, I think most of these reasons might be a little bit overblown, and I can kind of explain why people hated Battle for Azeroth so much.
What you up to, Shreds?
Short, simple term.
You're more than welcome to join us. We're just
as a mechanic, we're
just gonna do some mount runs.
Pretty much shaped the terrible first impressions of the
Low day, wasn't really a whole lot of people around.
Of the Legion's attack, our world is actually direly wounded, and Magni, speaker for Azeroth, speaker for her world soul, will reach out to us as some of her greatest champions and summon us, where we will commune with the World Soul at the very beginning of our journey, and we will receive a gift from Azeroth herself. An artifact-quality medallion called the Heart of Azeroth. Now, unlike the artifact weapons that you wielded in Legion, this artifact isn't something you're going to customize, doesn't have a huge trait tree to it, but what it does do is it serves as an incredibly potent power source that will unlock latent properties in many of the pieces of armor that you're going to come across and acquire throughout your journeys. So this is some early UI concept art for how this might play out. Here you see a helmet.
Shut up,
And
Ragnaros.
these
You're already
concentric
dead.
circles each reflect tiers of powers, where you can choose
See,
one
but that
tier
was
from
kinda
each ring,
cool,
one
'cause,
power from each ring. And your ability
like,
to
it-
access these tiers to unlock them will depend
It kind
on
of
how
fit
strong
with
your
like
amulet is.
you gotta kill him
stronger
on
helmet
heroic to
will
like
require
really
more
kill him.
levels
You know
of
what I
the
mean?
amulet
As
to
opposed to
equip,
just
to
dying the
access.
same exact way that he does
But
on heroic.
basically, when
Like he
we look
comes
at the
back
artifact
out, he
system,
grabs
there are a lot of
Sulfurous,
elements of
and goes
progression
back
that
into the
work very
lava. It's
well.
like, yeah, because
There
you
are
gotta get
others,
him on,
such as
you gotta get
making
him on
hard
heroic
choices
to actually
between
kill him. I just think that's
empowering
cool.
one specs weapon versus another that weren't so great, or lots of the inventory clutter, things like that. We're looking to improve a lot of the aspects of the system. We also want to give ongoing options for choice and customization, rather than the artifact weapon system where you made tons of choices back in September when you were first filling out the tree, but it's been largely linear progression since then. In this world, each piece of armor, in a handful of slots that we select, we currently have 3 in mind, will offer a potential for customization and choice in a handcrafted way. These are not random traits, unlike the Netherlight Crucible. A helm is a helm is a helm, and you can pick what you want to suit your playstyle, to suit your needs as you progress through the world.
Azeroth Armor was supposed to replace pretty much all of the fun new gear progression systems we had in the past. It was a series of 3 pieces of armor that you would have.
I remember
rings
having to
that would give
learn
bonuses
that
to
when
your
I
main
came back
specs
to the
and
game.
traits that you could find on these pieces of
Me
armor.
and Penguin leveled
And
up
if you
our
had a proper
characters
level
like
on your
really
necklace,
quickly,
which is
and then I remember
stat
having
stick,
to
you'd
like
be able to
learn
unlock
all
the
that.
pros in order to fully be able to
It was
use your
rough
armor.
because I didn't have a
And be
bunch
able
of people to
actually
just
farm all
ask
these pros
questions to.
actually required a pretty high neck level. So you had to do a lot.
And Penguin
of
was
grinding
brand new.
in
He had
order to
never
be able
played
to
the
use
game
your
before.
pieces of equipment. Now, on surface level, this doesn't really seem like that big of a deal. The only reason this was controversial was because of the drastic level of power differences it had from the previous expansion. In the previous expansion, you had artifact weapons, 2 legendaries, and tier set bonuses. And the artifact weapon had more traits on it by itself than all 3.
You want to go do midnight? Oh, wait a minute.
The upgrades you got throughout the expansion,
We don't have to
like
do
in the
midnight
Crucible.
anymore.
On top of that, you also had the legendaries, which provided additional huge
Let's
power
see.
increases,
Where
many
to?
classes
Where
expect for
to?
balance around
There's
their
another good
strongest
one.
legendary. And you also had tier set bonuses, which everybody who plays the game should know adds an extra layer of power to your character. In comparison, the Azeroth armor was like being able to pick what your tier set bonuses were.
Isn't that
However, it
the
was
new
kind
one
of
though?
worse in this way,
Is
because
hold on a
sometimes
second.
The tier set
Hold on a
bonuses
second.
were really good. And most of
That
the time,
is
the core
actually,
set
I was
bonuses were
wondering that
absolutely amazing for
yesterday
some classes.
when I was riding
But the way
around
the
on it.
Azeroth armor worked made it so they couldn't really make any of the traits.
Okay,
as
so
good as a
this
proper tier set
is-
bonus. Because all the traits had to be made with the
Isn't
intention
that the
that they could
updated
stack.
version
It was
of
possible to
Midnight
have
right
3
there?
of the same traits amongst all your
I
3
thought
pieces of
the
equipment.
old
You couldn't
Midnight
really
looked
do something
like,
that changed your
you
spec
know,
too
crappy.
drastically, because it had to
Versus
be something
Midnight
that could
Whom's
be
the
stacked
Mega
on top
Dungeon
of each
version
other.
of Kara
Now,
from
despite
Legion.
this, there were a couple
Okay,
of
that's the
Azeroth traits where
updated
you
one. So
only
we
took
can
it
get the
once because
old
there was a
one.
specific trait that did not stack,
That
like
looks,
increasing
I know
duration
exactly
from
what that
20
looks
seconds.
like.
But
It
for
looks
the
like my
most part, they were
first
made with
mount.
the intention of getting to stack with each other. So they generally just provided some kind of number increase to one of your
Which
abilities.
I don't even
And because of
see
this
it.
design choice, a lot of them were kind of boring. Some of the best tier set bonuses could drastically change how you played your class. Legendaries from Legion could completely
that would look
warp the
so good
rotation
with my
around them. And the artifact
transmog.
weapons themselves give you brand new abilities to push, with a couple of other extra abilities that would grant you sometimes, and a ton of passives that just make you stronger in other areas. So in comparison,
Yeah, it
of
looks
having
like
Azeroth
this,
armor,
like
which
kind of
gave you
like
boring
crappy like that,
abilities,
right?
replacing all this
It's
fun
called
stuff you
Fiery
used to have,
Warhorse.
and was meant to be the only thing you had for the entire expansion. It's no wonder the system was pretty much panned from the very beginning. There was massive amounts of feedback to change Azeroth armor to
Okay,
really
gotcha.
anything else. And
So
Blizzard's
Fiery
response was
Warhorse.
just to basically ignore most of that feedback. When the expansion launched and the entire player base finally got to try out Azeroth armor for themselves that all the streamers were complaining about in the beta, they too got to see firsthand just how much of a mess it was. What Azeroth armor could have been was a system about picking your own tier set bonuses.
Do you wanna
It
go
was
there?
actually kind of hard to get Azeroth pieces in the first place. And the Azeroth armor you got would only give you an option of 2, maybe 3 traits to pick for your major abilities. Because each Azeroth piece shared all of its traits amongst all of your specs, so you basically got to choose if you wanted the generic
What's up,
trait for the
Axe?
Azeroth piece, or your specs.
There's an old Caramount and a new one. Yes.
Year you had didn't
Deathlock,
have your
you can come with us if you want, man.
trait, then you had to find a completely new
We
piece
just
of gear that
relaxing.
might have it. However, Azerite armor gets even worse.
We'll get back
because
to
if you
keys
did
tomorrow.
Have a piece of gear that had the trait you wanted, and you got a higher item level piece of that Azerite gear, there's a good chance you wouldn't be able to use it because of your Azerite necklace level system. The higher the item level of the Azerite gear, the more levels you need on your Azerite necklace in order to use all of those traits.
Yeah, I
Even
have
if it
some
was
of
the
them.
exact same piece of equipment,
We
just
give
a
them
high
to
item
each
level,
other.
you wouldn't be able to use all
So
those
like
traits on
we
that
went
piece
and
of
did
equipment that you
Onyxia,
previously
and
had
Four's
been
already
using.
got
Problem,
Onyxia, so
because
she
there's
gave
the
it to me when it
arbitrary
drops.
having to
It
grind
dropped
your
for her
necklace levels in
again.
order to use your gear.
I was
So
losing
it
my
was
mind.
an
I went after
entirely
Onyxia
common
for so
scenario for
long
people to
and
not
didn't
be
get
able
that
to
stupid
use their
mount.
new pieces of equipment,
She got
using
2 of
low-level
them.
pieces of Azerite armor.
So now I
simply
go back
because
and
they couldn't
do
use the actual traits on their new
one
armor
that I
yet.
already have.
And it gets even worse,
Because I'm gonna give
because
it
the
to
traits
her
would
if I
not
get it.
reset if you change your spec. So you needed different Azerite armor for all of your different specs. And resetting the traits in order to change them to a different spec was not free. And in fact, incredibly expensive if you did it too often within a short amount of time. Which was just a mind-boggling
Got like 6
decision
new
by
mounts
the
Same
today
thing
for
happened
her.
when I got the Celestial Cloud Serpent. Friend already had it, ran it with them. They had it drop again and gave it to me.
Expansion that they dialed it back way too much with Azerite armor. And
Really? That's huge. I got that. I was all by myself. Remember when I came into the voice chat and I was like, I got it, I got it.
Blizzard basically abandoned the mechanic entirely after.
I didn't have anybody to tell. There was nobody around. It's just me by myself.
Expansion, but they made it so much easier to deal with. You could basically ignore it to an extent. They made Azerite armor easier to obtain. They created
where do I want to go?
Target specific pieces you needed. They gave you an extra row of traits and made it so it was almost
just
impossible
using my
to
Kara
not have
portal.
the highest level necklace to use all of your pieces of Azerite armor immediately, but still made it expensive to reforge for no reason.
Is there
However,
here? Let me
even
ask
though
you something
Blizzard
here
made it
real
a lot
quick.
easier
For
to deal with
is
Azerite
there
armor, it was
another
still the game
vendor
and still wasn't all that fun, which was a major
like
problem
this
because World of
vendor?
Warcraft
I
players
just got
loved
like
their
6
gear
new
more than
mounts today.
anything. There are some
Is
players
there
who don't
another
even
one
care
of
about ranger
these
dungeons.
that's more
They simply
updated?
do them because they just
The
want
War
gear.
Mount
There were whole secondary markets
Quartermaster.
of people paid massive amounts of gold
I
to get
bought
carried
all
through
of
the highest
these
level of content just
just
so they could
now.
get
I didn't
better
have
gear.
any of them.
So if Blizzard is going to mess up a feature,
15
they
Mark of
definitely
Honor
don't
is
want
all
to
it
mess up the
costed.
gear. And if anything, Battle for Azeroth proves why you should.
Do you know if there's another vendor like that for like another expansion?
People probably would have liked BFA a lot more. Because in this same expansion, we got Azerite
It's only
armor,
15
we also had
honor.
one of
I've
the
got
best
thousands of
additions to
honor
the
on
game
me.
in the form of the Essence system, which was created as a direct response to how bad Azerite armor was, and created a whole system of extra abilities you could choose from that could meaningfully change your gameplay, with extra passives you could pick, which could also
me
be
at
changed
256
without having to
mounts.
pay a whole bunch of money.
The
And without
vicious
taking away from your
saddles,
other
but those
pre-established
require
pieces of
rated
armor,
PvP
as it
and
just
getting
builds like
both
necklace,
current
which
season
wasn't
mount
doing
then winning more to
you
get
can
the
pick an active
token to
Okay.
buy one you don't
Okay.
have from
extra
earlier
single target,
seasons.
extra rate healing
Okay.
cooldown, extra defenses, or just big damage
I
against bosses
have.
with
I don't
armor.
have the
There were
rating,
a
but
lot of different active
I have the
abilities you could choose
currencies.
from that you could change depending on what kind of
Combat
content you're
Mount
doing. I know
Quartermaster.
I loved the
Those
Breath of the
take
Dying
actual.
essence, since it could let you chain one-shot mobs while doing dailies if the damage was high enough to kill the target. And also, I loved the Well of
Okay.
Resistance passive, since it stored
I guess
all
I'm
of
just
my
gonna use
overhealing
my
and turned it
portal.
into extra healing when needed, which was nice on a class that was built
Karazhan?
towards massive amounts of overhealing. And
That's
then
the
there was
only
Essence of
easy
Focus and
PvP
Iris,
ones
which I
to
don't think
get,
was really BIS for any class, but was
1400
easily
rating
one of
then
the
farming
coolest
wins
looking
after
actives
that
they've
to
added
get
to the
points
game,
towards
since
the
it's
mount and
basically
then
just a giant
token.
Kamehameha. Not only was all this a great response to Azerite armor being bad, it was one of the best borrowed power systems ever added. If we were to compare all of the borrowed power mechanics added in Modern WoW, I can't think of anything that could topple the essences. It's almost crazy how overshadowed they were, but to be fair, they weren't perfect either.
Okay.
Blizzard was hell-bent on giving people random grinds during this time period. It made getting the tier 3
So we'll
abilities
set
require a
this
bit of legwork
to,
accomplish,
let's
and did
see,
not make the
raid
mechanic
difficulty,
light.
because we're
So
doing
they
the
grinded
raid,
on
right?
alt an unnecessary pain. Although, to add on to that, they did have this unique
I want to say
mechanic
it was
that you grind
only
even
normal.
further to get a cosmetic upgrade tier 4 of the abilities, which did not increase its power, but
TBC
did make them
raid.
look a lot cooler. If anything, you'd be
No
great to have more
difficulties
grinds
to
get
it.
cooler looking versions of your default spells. This
Okay.
particular extra grind for
It
cosmetic
doesn't matter.
spells
Does it
is
matter?
one I'm
Or
sure
actually, if we
everyone
go in
would
on
be
this
on.
side, we're
This was
closer,
just an
aren't we?
excellent mechanic the BFA had, which isn't the only thing that BFA excelled at, because BFA also had one of the best
You
raids
go
the
straight
game
to the
ever
room.
introduced,
I
the
think
Battle for
this-
Dazara Lore.
That's the only way into the raid now.
Okay.
BFA was a full expansion with 4 raid tiers.
Mega
across 5 different
Dugin took
raids.
the other
You had
portal
Old Year's,
for
the
it.
intro raid, Battle for Dazara Lore and Crucible Storms for tier 2, Eternal Palace for tier 3, and finally Ny'alotha for the final raid of the expansion. And while the other raids were fine, Battle for Dazara Lore was easily the best of all of them. In fact, I'd say Battle for Dazara Lore is a top 5 raid. Out of the 29 different raid tiers, I think it's up there alongside Old War or ICC. Let's set the stage for Battle for Dazara Lore. The entire expansion was sold as a faction conflict. and there were a ton of quests on both sides in order to set up this eventual raid. As the Horde, you hear the Alliance is attacking far in the north, and they sent a huge army there that you have to go stop. So you help fight with the Zandalar forces through the Alliance forces, cutting your way through these desperate soldiers until you finally meet the gigantic navy at the shore, only to find out that it was all an illusion. The soldiers you were fighting were just sent there to die in order to sell the fact that they might have a giant army there waiting. But actually, they were in the middle of sieging the capital that very moment, so you had to run all the way back as quickly as possible only to find the city already being attacked. Then when you get inside, you find that King Rastakhan has already been killed. And the only thing you can do is learn about how it happened through someone retelling the story, and then chase after Jaina out in the open seas. And it had an amazing mechanic of actually changing your race to the opposite faction so you could be better immersed in the story, while also changing the dialogues that the NPC said for both sides in order to better sell how some sides tell the stories differently. The Horde would change into Alliance in order to play the story of attacking the capital, and the Alliance would turn into the Horde in order to play the part of the Horde going after
Since I
the
downloaded
inhabitants.
Rarity, it says
And then
that's
it
the
all culminates
first
in a
kill I've
final
gotten.
battle out in the open sea. You chase Jaina out into the sea where she turns around.
I
and
wish
just
Rarity
freezes
could
everything in
see
place.
your,
And what happens
like, I
next
wish
is just an amazing
Warcraft
boss fight.
stored that
I still
info
remember when
somewhere
I heard about
and
Dragon's
Rarity
Select
could get it
cannibalism, and how it
to
was a
see,
very
like, how
thematic
much you
raid with
did
all the boss
before you
fights.
downloaded
You would go
Rarity.
to the top of a tower, jump on a gunship to chase after Deathwing, parachute onto his back, and then finally beat him into the middle
Because
of
it's
the Maelstrom.
way off
And
on
while
my
all of this
ICC. It
sounded
says I've
cool
done it
in
96
theory,
times, but
when
I've
you
probably
actually
done
did
it
you had some of the
300 and
worst fights
something
ever.
times.
The gunship battle, which you were chasing after Deathwing on, was one of the most bug-filled fights I've ever had the displeasure of doing. The Spine of Deathwing is just one of the most hated fights ever made, and the final fight is one of the most disappointing final bosses ever, which is still kind of used as a benchmark to compare other disappointing final bosses to. They just really did not nail the thematic nature of the bosses, because they tried too much to make them thematic, and not enough to make them an actual good boss fight.
Yeah.
So, when I first heard about the Jaina fight being another thematic boss fight, I was kind of skeptical, which probably made me like the fight even more.
Man,
when
a
I felt
mage
that
would
they
be really
totally
handy.
nailed it. The fight starts off on a boat where
Mage
you're fighting
with
Jaina and
portals.
her Marines. You can DPS down the Marines like normal, or you can
You got
have your
640
priest
mounts?
mind control them and
Dang.
have them jump off them,
Dang.
which I thought was a really neat mechanic to add to a boss fight, because generally they don't let you do things like that in boss fights, even though it totally makes sense from a thematic point of view. At any point that you're fighting Jaina, if your group tries to bloodless, Jaina will actually ice block for the duration of it, like a smart character would do that knows their enemy's tactics. So you'd have to wait for the opportune moment of the fight in order to pop bloodless in order to fight other things that were in Jaina or to interrupt mechanics. When Jaina freezes the boat in the ocean and runs to the middle, and you have to chase after her, you're constantly getting stacks of a frostbite debuff, which makes sense because you're fighting on a gigantic slab of ice created by an enemy. And you have to warm yourself by going to flame barrels, which also makes sense because you were just on a boat earlier that would realistically have those nearby. When Jaina gets too much to handle and tries to freeze everyone, you have to run back to the boat in order to
Hassel
grip her,
Nathria
so you can help
Mythic
you
just
deal with
falls
Jaina's skill
over.
attacks. And in the final phase
You
of
can
the
go
fight,
in
you're
there
trying
with
to burn her
two or
down
three
before everybody
people.
freezes to death, where she ice blocks and teleports away at the end. I'm still not really sure how they nailed it, but I can't remember the last time I've had so much fun progressing on a boss fight, because it
But
was
no
full of
mounts.
a whole bunch of multiple
No
players and
mounts.
moving all over the place and doing a lot of unique things where you were basically just fighting an ice mate. And also it helped that it wasn't overly long, which is usually the case for mid-expansion final boss fights and not the final ones. So if anything, the fact that it was the second raid of the expansion probably worked in its favor of not making the fight too long to overstay its welcome, and be exactly the right length to be a masterpiece of a boss fight. And in fact, to this day, the Jaina final fight is my personal favorite boss fight.
Oh
The rest
yeah,
of the
Lady
raid was
Jaina.
also excellent, with a mini final boss in the middle where you're fighting King Rastakhan, who's
That's
obviously
one
not
we
as
could
hard as
just get
Jaina,
in the
but
Pugger
fitting
and
for
get a
main
Lady
war
Jaina
character
group
when
together
defeated.
real fast.
Now, obviously,
Did
one
it,
raid doesn't make an
I did it
entire
last
expansion,
week, and
but
they
it's
had
really
like
hard
probably
to
like
state just
7
how
people
good
in
Battle
there,
for Tazar alone
which obviously the
was.
more people,
After
the
raid, we
easier
had
it is.
Mechagon and
What was
Nashville,
such a
two
good
brand new
raid?
Or the
massive
grouping
zones
or
to
whatever.
explore, full of treasures and rares and certain mechanics. On
I feel
Mechagon,
like
you
I
had a
still
really good
need a
tune to
mythic
modify
kill in
putting
there.
gems inside of it in order to
Maybe
have
not.
the
I
effects
might-
that you wanted.
Like
The best
I
effect
don't
was
have
a
any
laser that
glory
did so much
achievements. Hey
damage that it
Plox,
was nerfed to
I don't have any
multiple
glory
times. And for a
achievements
while, it was
for
one of the best legacy
BFA
tools
or
used in time walking content. The laser
think I
beam
got-
is easily
I think
one
I
of the
got
most
one in
overpowered trigger effects
Shadowlands,
ever
but-
made. Over in Nazjatar, you had a gigantic zone full of all kinds of hidden treasures to find, like a secret quest chain where you
There's
go
so
around and
many
trade all
meta
sorts of
achievements I
different items
still
and different
need.
NPCs in order to unlock a mount.
I
Plus,
miss
they had scheduled
Nyalathur,
PvP events
but
in the
I
zone
got
and
to
just a
raid
ton of
Mythic
things
for
to
it, so
grind out
that's
if you wanted
probs
100%
why.
all the achievements and collectibles. And back in Mechagon, there were these little workstations around the zone which could give you a zone buff that can help you kill things quicker or just get around faster, as well as unlocking the collectibles from all the hidden quests,
Nyalotha,
rares,
yeah.
and events. And yes, there
Yep,
were
Nyalotha
hidden
falls
quests in the
over
zone,
too. You
which
just
was a
gotta have
really
like
unique
I
thing
think
for
like
modern
4
WoW, because they
people.
don't really make hidden quests anymore.
4
In
people
order
would
to
do
100%
it.
the zone, you had to find out how to get these hidden quests, which could actually take a while because you did need
Set
to do a bunch
Heroic
of specific things in
Plaza.
order to unlock them. And if you weren't a collector and didn't care about all this hidden stuff, the actual power upgrades you got from the zone were pretty straightforward and required minimal
Is
effort.
there there's a org portal
I'm kinda
here,
sad
isn't
they
there?
don't do this more often. In fact, I don't think they've ever done this again. In Shadowlands, they had a max level zone for all 3 major patches.
Take the
You had
boat.
Maw, Korthia,
Just
and
take the
Mortis.
boat.
In Legion, they did have Argus as a gigantic zone you unlocked at the end of the expansion. But, to be honest, it was just a glorified world quest zone. The fact that Nazjatar and Megagon
Before
were
it
unique in their
leaves,
mechanics
we'll
and
take you to
very
Ratchet,
separate from
then
each
fly
other
to Org
just
right
made the
next
max
to
level
it.
zones so much more fun to play in during the expansion. If you got bored of Mechagon, you could just hop over to Nazjatar and start doing dailies there. And it was just a completely different feel because of how differently the mechanics of the zones
I've got
functioned.
I still
In
have my
Argus, even though you did
Legion,
have 3 different zones, they all had the
Hearth,
exact same zone mechanics. So it was
which
basically
I
like
suppose
3
I probably
different
could have
sceneries on
taken
top
that
of
and
the
then
same
just
thing.
went to Org
They
from
tried
there.
something new with Mechagon and Nazjatar, and the community largely loved it. It's kind of hard to explain just how negative the community perception of the game was at the time. However, even in this
Idlehalfton
incredibly
went to
hostile environment
Orglol.
of BFA,
Yeah, that's
people
what I should
agreed
have
that these
done.
2 new zones were
Him
fun,
sitting
and
at
they really liked the
Dragon
idea of having
Soul's
both
portal
of them playing
already
at the same
lol.
time. If they only just added one or the other at a time, probably people wouldn't like them very much, but the fact they added them both at the same time was what made it a huge W for Battle for Azeroth. Which is a shame that all of these great things are just overshadowed by Azerite armor. Azerite armor is just the black stain on the expansion. It was only really terrible for the very beginning, but has kind of painted the legacy
I forgot
brand
about
of Battle
that
for Azeroth.
portal.
Or is it really fair to just blame everything on a failed gear?
Caverns of Time
I'd argue
portal
the gearing system
downstairs
is
in the
just as
Parat
important,
room.
as I said
Okay.
earlier in the video, but there also was a lot of other incredibly mediocre things about the expansion, which definitely added fuel to the arguments against it. While the battle for Dazara lore, essences, the dual inclusion of Mechagon and Nazjatar were well liked, there were plenty of other things added to expansion that were deservedly also just bad and not well liked. Namely, the island expeditions and the war fronts. Island expeditions were sold as an exploratory thing where you go to an island, search for treasures, and fight enemy faction who's trying to stop you from doing this. What ended up being was an AoE grindfest, where you just go around and gather as many mobs as possible and then AoE them down, in order to finish as quickly as you could. Because island expeditions were one of the best ways to grind out your necklace level, and many hardcore players hated them by the end of the expansion for just how many they had to do. Warfronts were sold as a Warcraft 3 style mode, where you could collectively choose which minions and bases to build in order to eventually push into the enemy keep. What it actually ended up being was an AFK simulator, where it was so hard to lose that there wasn't
wait a
really
minute.
a big incentive to try, other than maybe winning a little bit earlier. Because even if you did try as hard as you couldn't actually win that quickly because there was built-in timers restricting you from how fast you could accomplish things. And these 2 features were some of the main selling points of the expansion. Island expeditions were
Go
supposed to
inside
be a
the
brand
cavern.
new mode that would have you exploring all these new locations and getting treasures, and while it was full of collectibles, they were not fun at all to do. And Warfronts were just kinda boring, where the best way to do them was just to put on a good Netflix show on your second monitor and just kinda mindlessly kill things and collect wood and minerals for when the game would eventually let you push the enemy keep. It was so bad that they never added the Barons or Silvermoon Warfronts
That's
that had
right.
game files, and never tried a PvP mode like they said they might. And on the flip side, the only good thing that BFA had were its raiding content, Mythic Plus, Essence System, the dual inclusion of Mechagon and Nazjatar, and the allied races. Although let me rewind a little bit on this. During BFA, Blizzard tried to iterate on the Mythic Plus system they'd introduced in the previous expansion, where they introduced seasonal affixes that would be applied to Mythic Plus dungeons of levels 10 and higher, and they were actually a big success. The affix of the final tier of BFA had this mechanic where you would fight these minions of the old gods at points throughout the dungeon, and where they died in the other realm would spawn a portal that would take you back to the dungeon. And you could use these portals in the other realm in order to skip mobs, which was an amazing design choice because
I
at
miss
the
that
time,
affix so
a key
much.
meta in Mythic Plus dungeons
Is
was
that the
how to
right way?
properly skip mob packs.
No, that's
Because
not
a lot
right.
of the
The
times in
skips
high
you
level
could
Mythic Plus
do,
dungeons,
and
the
set
trash
Heroic
mobs were more
Plaza
dangerous
Crow.
than the actual bosses themselves.
I already
And
did.
you would strategically skip ones that were too hard or just not worth the effort.
Raid difficulty
and only
set
be
to
able complete
25
these
player
ones if you
heroic.
built a meter in order to complete the dungeon. And the meta at the time was just to have a bunch of rogues in order to skip those packs, to the point where there was a lot of contention in the pugging Mythic Plus dungeon community, where it almost felt like you were required to have at least one rogue so you could skip certain mob packs. And this entire thing was completely solved with this affix, that just lets you skip whatever you wanted, just as long as you position the portals where you thought they would be best. It was such a successful mechanic that I'm sure many people are sad they didn't bring it back further for any other seasonal affixes, or just added it as a default mechanic in Mythic Plus dungeons. However, modern Mythic Plus dungeons make it a lot easier to skip mob packs you don't want to do, or just make it so skipping isn't really possible anymore, so I guess they solved it in one way or another. But the addition of these seasonal affixes were an absolute W for the expansion, and were tied to an incredibly important mode for the expansion as one of the 3 pillars of endgame content, and we still have these seasonal affixes to this day. And then of course we have the allied races, where Blizzard just kinda doubled the available races that players could use during this expansion. They had to create a whole new tab just to hold all the new races they gave you, where they didn't give you another new race until Dragonflight, where you just got a single new race. Now, a lot of the races were basically just slightly different colored versions of previous races we had before, but it doesn't really matter when it comes to getting brand new racials to pick from. My current main is one of these allied races that was added in BFA, and it's because a lot of the new racials were just so much more interesting than the older ones. I love that Zandalari trolls get to pick which minor bonus you have, and you get to change it out once a week to be something else. So really, BFA seems kind of stacked with
I remember
good
these.
things.
My
It had
10-man
a
team
massive
did
piece
these
of
too.
array. It introduced a long-lasting mechanic to the Mythic Plus system that players actually liked. It had a whole bunch of new races to play with, which had the unintended side effects of filling the old world with people leveling these new races. It had excellent max level zone ideas. It did have an excellent endgame system with the essences. So why exactly does Azerite armor, boring islands, and warfronts overshadow all this other stuff? Well, because the gear problems don't end with Azerite. I didn't even talk about Titan Forging or Corruptions yet. Titan Forging was a mechanic not added in BFA, but it was definitely ended in BFA, where whenever you got a new piece of equipment, there was a chance that it would just be a higher item level than normal. And there was a chance it would be an incredibly higher item level than normal if it Titan Forged. The very possibility that an item could Titan Forge meant that there was always the incentive to do max level content, because you never could have a full set of Titan Forge gear. So you never could have the best possible gear in the game at the time. It literally just added a random layer of gambling to your gearing system, where if your gear didn't have some kind of Warforge or Titan Forge proc on it, it was kind of a disappointment to just get a normal piece of gear. And while it was fun to get a Titan Forge piece of gear, it caused all kinds of contempt in the community because people did not like the fact that their gear progression was tied behind a random mechanic they had no control over. So eventually Blizzard did remove it, but it was in the expansion for at least half of its lifetime. And then it was replaced with Corruptions. Now, Corruptions were a mechanic that would have a piece of gear with a huge benefit attached to them, where they could do things like increase your haste, lower the cooldowns in your abilities, or just have a proc that simply did extra damage to whatever you're attacking. And pieces of equipment could have random corruption on it whenever you got it, and corruptions had 3 different levels to them based on the kind of.
I remember having to
worked.
fix this
so if you got
boss.
a new pair of gloves, for example,
The
there was a
private
chance you
server.
could have a corruption on that piece of equipment. And there was a chance the corruption could be one of the corruptions you wanted, and then there was another chance the corruption could have a tier 3 corruption, which was the strongest of all of them and the most useful.
Deathwing,
most of
you
the
so
time.
big.
So, they removed Titan Forging,
You so
a mechanic
big.
that people hated because it added an unnecessary level of
Robots
RNG
pulling the
to
whole.
your gear
Yeah.
in order to introduce an even bigger source of RNG on top of your gear. However, they did have ways to get specific corruptions, where you could just go to a vendor and just buy the corruption you wanted and just enchant them to your non-corrupted piece of gear like you would an enchant. And this totally would have solved all of the major problems with the corruption system, if it wasn't for the fact the corruptions were on a rotating vendor.
I remember
where you
this
had to wait a couple
RP
weeks
took
to be able
like
to buy the
5
corruption
minutes
you
before it
actually
kicked in too.
And the system was not introduced at the launch of the patch that introduced corruptions, so by the time you could buy the ones you wanted, you were probably done with progression if you were a hardcore player. And the corruptions also worked in PvP, so it created a balancing nightmare. However, even with all of these negative things about corruptions, the corruptions themselves were really strong. Like, insanely strong. Like, a full set of your best corruptions made you stronger than you were in Legion strong. You could lower your cooldowns on major abilities to be able to spam them. You could also have so much haste that you were melting people in less than 10 seconds in PvP. You could have so many layers of Twilight Devastation with stamina gear on that you could literally one-shot your enemy team as a tank in arena matches. The corruptions were absolutely bonkers, and that's what I loved about them. They were not balanced at all. Hardcore players hated corruptions because of how bad they made the game for them. But for us average players, being able to one-shot groups of enemies with a perfectly timed proc of Twilight Devastation was awesome. Being able to go and collect a whole bunch of different kinds of equipments with different corruptions in order to just try out different builds was tons of fun. And also the amount of grinding that was required to get a hold of all these new pieces of gear with different corruptions definitely tickled all the parts of my brain that loves to play MMOs and grind for power increases. I loved corruptions. I loved how unbalanced they were. I loved how much grinding was required to get the ones you wanted. I loved how they worked in all types of content you did. I loved how they made getting Keystone Master a breeze during the final tier of the expansion. And I also loved that they were only in the game for that one tier and did not carry over into any other expansions. If anything, I think corruptions succeeded specifically because they were temporary. They were an excellent power imbalance created specifically because they wanted to cause a power imbalance, and because it would be the final raid of the expansion that nobody liked. So it was the perfect time to try something stupid like corruptions, and it was a masterpiece in being broken. I applaud Blizzard for trying corruptions. They were so bad. None of the streamers or YouTubers praised them for being good, and if anyone did, they'd be rightly mocked for it because they weren't good. And that's what was so great about them. Sometimes it's fun to just have an imbalanced mess, and it's another aspect of this expansion that kinda gets overlooked because of just how bad they were on paper. Objectively speaking, corruptions were not good for the game. They were absolutely terrible. But they were so much fun nonetheless. And if anything, I wanted to see Blizzard try something like this again in different expansions. Although most of the time they never go as far as they do with corruptions and power level, and are too conservative with what kinds of powers that let you get with a power mechanic. So, BFA in review,
the Cataclysm
it had one of the
models.
worst gear issues of any expansion, but also had great level.
Have they been updated again since?
Mechanics, although unbalanced, part of their fun was their unbalanced nature, and tons and
Alex
tons
Strazo
of
looks
in
like
comparison to many other expansions. After all, we weren't missing an entire raid tier like in
It's like that might be the new model. It is with this X okay.
After Battle for Dazara lore. Was BFA as bad as people remember? In some ways, yes, because it was so bad Blizzard was free to try stupid things, and it led to tons of fun, making it a blast for people who got to enjoy it. And at the number 10 spot, we have the Marks of Honor PvP mounts. All in all, you'll be able to buy 7 unique mounts with 15 Marks of Honor each, 6 from your faction's capital, and 1 from Wintergrasp, the Black War Mammoth. PvP Marks of Honor can be obtained randomly from boxes you get from winning Battlegrounds. You get 5 when you complete the weekly Battleground event, 5 for completing the bi-weekly PvP Brawl quest, and a few other scattered ways to obtain them, including one rare Legion Order Hall mission that sometimes pops up, that will give you one as a bonus reward. Or if you farmed up a whole bunch of them in Legion, when World Quest still gave them, and have a whole bunch lying around like I do, you can just go to the vendor and buy all the mounts instantly. Now what makes these mounts easy to get is the fact that there's no random chance for them. You just need to save up a currency and buy them whenever you want. And there's no real rush either. These mounts have been around forever and always cost whatever PvP currency is currently available. As I bought all of mine back in Wrath of the Lich King when honor points were still the form of currency, instead of an experience for your honor thing. And at number 9, we have the Disc of the Red Flying Cloud. In order to obtain this mount, you need to be exalted with the Lore Walkers. Luckily, getting exalted with this faction is really easy, and can be done in under an hour from neutral. To get exalted with the Lore Walkers, all you do is go around Pandaria and click on little scrolls out in the open world. Now, there's a ton of these scrolls, and you have to click on basically all of them in order to hit exalted. But once you complete a series of them, you'll be mailed an item which will give you a quest to turn in, which then gives you a ton of rep. And once you've collected all of them, it is exactly the amount you need in order to hit exalted. Now, I have an add-on that basically just pointed me to exactly where I needed to go for all of the scrolls to be clicked on. But this option isn't really available for the normal player, but thankfully, there is many guides on the internet that will show you exactly where you need to go. And I'll have a Wowhead guide linked in the video description below. Once you fly around Pandaria and click on all the scrolls and listen to all of Lore Walker Cho's storytelling, you'll be able to buy them out basically immediately, and it's really simple to do. And at number 8, we have the Dark Moon Dark Water Skate. This mount is only obtainable during the Dark Moon Fair, but unlike the other mounts in the Dark Moon Fair, it doesn't actually cost Dark Moon Fair tokens. Instead, it costs 500 Dark Moon Daggermaw fish. And the way to obtain Dark Moon Daggermaw fish is to simply fish anywhere in the Dark Moon Fair. Any level of fishing works, and every cast will get you
that's why I always
fish.
see people fishing in Dark
Moon. You don't need
Moon.
to fish from pools. Fishing from pools, though, will sometimes give you an item which will contain multiple Dark Moon Daggermaw fish, but it's really not worth your time running around looking for pools. The best way to fish this up is just to sit down somewhere and fish in one location until you have 500 fish. You can also buy the fish on the auction house if you want to save yourself some time. For this video though, I decided to fish them all up myself to see how long it would take. And while having an anime on my second monitor and fishing on my main monitor, I was able to do it in 4 hours. I was honestly expecting it to take a lot longer than that, but it really wasn't that bad. And then once you have the 500 fish, you just go to the vendor and buy it. Just a note, this is an underwater only mount, which can be either a detriment or a plus, depending on who you ask, because there isn't really that many underwater mounts in the game, so it's nice to have an alternative. And at number 7, we have the Bone White Primal Raptor. In order to obtain this mount, you need 9,999 bones from the Isle of Giants. And the best way to farm bones is to just go around the island and kill literally everything you see, as all the NPCs on the island, except the faction-specific NPCs, drop the dinosaur bones. You can also buy the bones on the auction house, but 10,000 bones is quite a lot, and there wasn't really that many on the auction house when I tried to lessen my load when farming the bones myself for this video. All in all, I casually farm bones for about 15 minutes a day over the course of a week, with some days doing much longer than 15 minutes, and it only took me so long because I faced so much competition. There are so many people on the Isle of Giants for some reason, but I think it's because they're there to farm the world boss. But I also had tons of competition just killing the normal dinosaurs as
Kate.
well. I have a
How
friend
you
who
doing?
also farmed the mount around the same time I was trying it, and she was able to
We
do
have
it
just
all
been
in one
doing
day
some mount
by
runs.
server hopping to an
Not
RP
many
server,
people on
which
today,
didn't have
so.
sharding in lower level zones.
Hey, Yogi.
So that might be an option for you if you want to farm all the bones yourself.
So we'll get back to
One of
running
the great
keys
things about farming
tomorrow.
this mount is while killing the mobs for the bones, they will sometimes drop an egg, which will hatch into another mount. While doing all of my farming, I got 2 eggs, and both had a mount in it. This egg has a chance to give you
This has been
one
pretty
of 3
relaxing, though,
mounts,
doing the mount runs.
but unlucky for me, I got the same mount twice. So while farming the guaranteed white Primal Raptor, you also have a chance at getting the black, red, and green Primal Raptors as well as a whole bunch of pets, because these dinosaurs also drop a ton of raptor pets like Candy, which is actually a really good pet in pet battles. And once you have the 10,000 bones, you simply go to the Kuma the Bone Collector.
You could look up a Lady
Who's
Jaina
located in like the only cave
in the
and turn
Legacy
in the option
Finder,
for
too.
the quest, a mountain of giant dinosaur bones, and he'll give you the mount. Number 6, the Riding Camels. These are 2 camel mounts that can be obtained for 100 gold each when hitting Exalted Reputation with the Ramka Hen. What makes these mounts especially easy to obtain is the fact that you can simply buy a tabard from the quartermaster once you hit friendly with Reputation.
Oh, I never noticed the
and
map
then go
before.
run and spam Cataclysm
That's cool.
dungeons. With a tabard, all kills of mobs and bosses in Cataclysm dungeons will grant a rep to the Ramka Hen. So if you wanted to, you could do a rotation of all the heroic dungeons once per day. Or you can just head over to the Lost City of Tolvir.
You Jaina
and
too?
run in
Okay.
a normal mode
I
and
just
then
bought another
reset
egg
it,
from
and
Oracle's
then run it
Strength, that
again.
elusive
Since you can
green
reset a normal
Krowten.
dungeon 10 times an hour, you should be able to farm this particular dungeon infinitely.
Yeah,
until you have the
it's
amount of
just
reps needed.
fate.
The reason I chose Lost City of Tolvir is because it's a pretty short dungeon.
I think a
It all
lot of
takes
people had
place
the
in a
same
small
idea,
area,
just
and running back to the
taking a
entrance
day
after
off a
killing the final
while.
bosses really fast. Whereas a lot of the other Cataclysm dungeons require much longer runbacks to the entrance. Now, I'm not
Fine with
saying this is
me.
the
We'll
best
go all
dungeon to farm
weekend.
rep from, but it is a good one. Then, once you hit Exalted with the rep after a few hours of farming, you can just fly back to the Quartermaster, which is in the same zone as the Lost City of Tolvir, and buy your 2 camel mounts. Now, unfortunately, there are no other reputation mounts from Cataclysm that are as easy to get as the Riding Camels. There are other reputation mounts, but they do not have a tabard that allows you to run dungeons to get rep for them like you can with the Riding Camels. Number 5, the Secret Finder mounts. Secret Finder mounts are referring to the mounts which require incredibly cryptic clues and puzzles to solve, to have you go around the world and click on a whole bunch of really random things in order to get that mount. Luckily, the only really hard part about getting these mounts is when the Secret Finding Discord first tries discovering how to get them. Once they
Okay.
do figure it out, many different websites and YouTubers basically fight each other for putting out a guide first on how to get it as well. So there is tons of information on the internet on how to get all of these mounts. And if you just follow other people's instructions, you get a guaranteed unique mount at the end of a couple hour-long cross-continental journey of finding random things adventure. Now, you do have to do some work to get them, and some of them require solving a puzzle on your own. But at the end of your efforts, you're rewarded with a guaranteed mount, which makes these mounts very fitting for this list. Getting some of these mounts by just following a guide is honestly sometimes easier than collecting 10,000 dinosaur bones on the Isle of Giants, for example. And there are so many steps involved in pretty much all of them that going over them would be longer than this video itself. So instead, I'll just have a link to a Wowhead guide that has all of them listed, so you can just look them up yourself. Number 4, the Winter Spring Frostsaber and the Venomhide Ravasaur. Both of these mounts are obtained by doing 20 days of dailies. The Frostsaber is the Alliance version, and the Ravasaur is the Horde version. If you do one or the other, you will be rewarded with the other one. For example, if you obtain the Winter Spring Frostsaber, all of your Horde characters will automatically obtain the Venomhide Ravasaur and vice versa. That's why I have them both clumped up together. Now, as to which one is easier to do, that's without a doubt the Winter Spring Frostsaber. The Venomhide Ravasaur has an introduction quest, which is actually really hard to do on a max level character, as it takes place in Ungrow Crater and requires you to get poisoned 20 times by a low-level mob, who will only poison you when you hit it. Sometimes. So you have to hit the mob multiple times in order to maybe get poisoned. And on a max level character, you'll be one-shotting the mob every time. And even on a level appropriate character, it still took me 30 minutes to complete the quest. And I can't imagine how long it would take on a max level character, even if they took off all of their gear and punched it. And I doubt many people have 50 alts on their account at random different levels to just go to Ungrow Crater with a level appropriate character alt like I could. But with the Alliance version and the Winter Spring Frost Saber, you basically just start on your dailies right away. And the dailies are really easy to do on a max level character. They usually just have you go around and kill things, collect things, or have your little guy jump on snow puddles or something. Same thing with a raptor. You go around and kill things and feed things to your raptor, and after 20 days of doing the dailies for your little guy and having a few materials, you just turn in the quest and you'll get your mount. Number 3, the Tannan Diplomat. In the process of getting this achievement, you can potentially unlock 5 mounts. Tannan Diplomat is the achievement required for Draenor pathfinding, the meta achievement that allows you to fly in Draenor. So it's a pretty useful thing to get. And the reason I chose Tannan Diplomat is because you can get this to Exalted if you just buy 21 medallions of the Legion. So it's a really quick rep grind if you have tons of money, as each medallion usually goes for around 10k on the auction house. Otherwise, you can just farm it like normal by doing all the quests in the Tannan Jungle and then doing dailies. Now, for the mounts you can obtain, getting the meta achievement will unlock the Soaring Sky Terror mount, which is 1. Getting Exalted with the Vol'jin Headhunters for Horde, or Hand of the Prophet for Alliance, will unlock the Death Tusk Felboar at their Quartermaster that you can buy for 2,500 gold. Getting friendly with the Order of the Awakened unlocks the Corrupted Dreadwing mount, who does require 150,000 Apexis crystals to buy though. Apex crystals do drop like candy in the Tannan Jungle, but the best way to farm them would be to do your daily Apexis quest from your garrison. You can also buy those missions from the Quartermaster in front of the main hub in your garrison. Your shipyard should routinely have missions that give 2,000 to 5,000 Apexis crystals each. A lot of rares drop Apex crystals. Killing Kazakhs gives 1,000. Basically, you gotta farm crystals, and there's tons of ways to do it. And for the Saber Stalkers, there are 2 boar mounts available. But these ones require their own special currency that's not as abundant to farm as Apexis crystals. You need to farm Blackfang Claws, which only drop from mobs associated with the Saber Stalker's rep. So to get it, you're just going to have to kill a whole bunch of mobs to get the 6,000 needed to buy both mounts. Number 2, a combination of 3 Burning Crusade rep mounts.
What's up?
Kurenai,
no kick today?
Maghar,
yeah, I'm on kick.
And the
Streaming now.
Skyguard. Getting 3 of 4 of these to Exalted will net you 14 mounts. The Kurenai and the Maghar both have 8 Talbuk mounts available at Exalted, and the only difference between them is their faction tags. Getting Exalted with the Kurenai is needed for the Alliance, and getting Exalted with the Maghar is needed for the Horde. And getting both of them to Exalted is done in basically the same way. You just need to do every quest available to them, and then once you run out of quests, you just farm beads from ogres in Nagrand. Depending on your competition, you can farm enough beads from ogres in as little as 4 hours, but realistically it's going to take a little bit longer than that. In my experience of farming old world stuff for mounts for this video, there is always people out there farming for mounts, no matter how old the content is.
Let
Once you get Exalted, you can just buy
slimes or whatever stack up, right? Until we get like 7 of them or something like that.
Only has 1 mount available for its
and then
Exalted
kill them all at
reputation,
once.
And that's the Cenarian War Hippogriff. At 1 mount, it's a lot easier to
Corrupted
farm
Blood.
than the 8 Talbuks, because all you have to do is like 5 quests to unlock the ability to gain reputation with the Cenarian Expedition, and then you can just head over to the Heroic Underbog and kill trash and reset the dungeon until you've hit Exalted. Just make sure not to kill the bosses, otherwise the trash won't respawn when you reset the dungeon. The Shatari Skyguard rep at Exalted will have 5 Netherray mounts available. In order to get this faction to Exalted, the quickest way to do it is to do enough quests so that you unlock the quest World of Shadows and the dailies. Then you go out and kill Sketis Arakoa until you have 6 Shadow Dust, which you can turn in for an item that will allow you to enter a Shadow World, full of mobs that give you the rep needed. And grinding the rep involves basically getting this buff, killing as much things and collecting as many items as possible for the duration of that buff, and then getting enough shadow dust to get this buff again. This is actually a lot of mob grinding, but I thought I should mention it with the other two that are a little bit easier to get, just because it's also located in Outlands, and technically can be done in a day.
So what, you leave the tentacle up and then is the tentacle spawning the bloods?
There's also the Netherwing faction, a much more difficult reputation to grind than the previous 3 that rewards you with 6 Netherwing Drakes at the end of it. I wouldn't exactly call it an easy mount to obtain though, but I felt I should at least mention it here since it's only a little bit harder to gain than the other ones. And at number 1, I thought I would go with one of the more recently added easy to get mounts, and those are the 3 Marsh Hoppers. These mounts can be obtained by simply finding the vendor in Nazmir, who's located at this spot on the map. Once you find him, he has 3 frog mounts available, but here's the catch. They're kind of expensive. Each mount costs 333,333 gold. So in order to obtain all 3 of them, you need to spend around 1 million gold total, which isn't exactly an easy thing to do. For the amount of gold you spend on buying one of these frogs, you can buy enough tokens to purchase a mount from the cash shop. But also, these frogs aren't ridiculously expensive like the auction house mount, or even the Mad Merchant mounts, which all cost over 1 million gold each. So I thought these kind of fit this list. They're kind of expensive, but not unreasonably so. I personally only bought 1 because they're all the same mount, just different colors. So you don't really need more than 1, unless you're really rich or want to fill out your collection. And at number 10, we have the Grand Ice Mammoths. These are 2 mammoths you can buy from a quartermaster in Storm Peaks for 800 and 8,000 gold respectively, taking into account the reputation bonuses. During Wrath of the Lich King, when these were available, that was kind of a high price for the mounts. But nowadays, that's almost trivial. You can easily make enough gold to buy both of these in a week of normal playing, unless you're just absolutely terrible at making gold. And the Reigns of the Grand Ice Mammoth is one of the few mounts in the game that allows other players to ride on top of it alongside you. So it's kind of worth getting. Now all you have to do is just grind out the Sons of Hodir rep to Exalted, which used to be kind of a pain in the butt. It wasn't the hardest thing to do in the world, but it did kind of take a while even if you took the shortcuts of farming out a special item that you could turn in for more rep. When they introduced the time walking system, they did make grinding it out a lot faster as well, since you could just convert the time walking currency.
Well, he got big for a second and then...
Rep. However, recently they made a change to time walking weeks, where now during time walking weeks for the associated expansion, you get a 50% rep buff that applies to all quest and monster kills with the reputations of that expansion, which definitely includes
I can see the stacks. We've gotten it up to 7 is the highest I've seen it so far, but like
time walking currency to buy the reputation tokens and grind out the rep
still not really
with a 50%
fully
buff,
understanding,
which makes it almost trivial to do as long as you wait for that specific time walking week now. However, you do still need to unlock the reputation and the quartermaster, which requires you to start the quest chain in K3 and takes you through half the zone with a whole bunch of quests centered around Thorum and his relationship with the Frost Giants. Although if you get some of the rep early through turn in badges, it will be applied to the reputation as soon as you unlock the rep, so that you don't have to worry about wasting it in case you forgot to unlock the reputation first before turning in badges. And at number 9, we have one of the easiest mounts to get in the game, which was added towards the end of Battle for Azeroth. And that, of course, is the Mail Muncher. This is a mount which is obtainable from Horrific Visions by clicking on a special mailbox located in all 5 of the zones. The mailboxes always are in obvious locations, and it's always the same mailbox in each zone. So you can just memorize the 5 mailboxes you have to click on in both versions and just try every time you go there for your normal runs. Or specifically, just click on the mailboxes if you don't care about completing the visions normally. I'll have locations of all the mailboxes on screen, but there's also add-ons you can install which will point them out to you, like handy notes. The Mail Muncher has a pretty generous drop chance, but it's not guaranteed, so you could get it after a couple of attempts, or it could take you about 100. The act of obtaining this mount as being easy is kind of a meme in the WoW community, but even if it is a meme, it's still not that difficult to obtain. You just have to defeat a mini-boss after clicking on the mailbox and you get the mount as a drop. You don't need to finish the vision normally after you get the drop, and once you actually click on the mailbox which contains the Mail Muncher, you just defeat a version of the Mail Muncher that drops the item for you, which will be available for you immediately. One of the few items you can pick up in the vision
you gotta be shitting me,
without having to wait for the boxes at the end of the vision. And at number 8, we have the Smoldering Ember Worm. This mount can be obtained with a 20% chance as long as you complete the Mythic version of Legion Karazhan, in a special way. You see, there's a couple
Oh my
of crystals that
God.
spawn in the dungeon.
We
and
gotta
after you
keep
click on the
those
first one
tentacles
after the
dead
Aqua battle,
on
you'll
all
have
four
about
sides.
a 10-minute buff, which will allow you to click on the second one, which is located in a room right before the boss meeting of Virtue. Then you just need to run over to Morose and click on the one that's very obviously right behind him. Afterwards, you'll have to head downstairs to the
watch this.
spider room and click on the one at the end of a corridor that's not actually near a boss. So you have to deliberately try to click on all these crystals so you can't get them out doing the place normally. Although after clicking on this crystal, they'll give you a little teleport which will save you some time and let you go back upstairs. Every time you click on a crystal, it resets the duration and even increases the amount of time you have in order to complete getting the last crystal, which simply requires you to kill the Curator boss. After you kill the Curator, it'll drop the crystal on his body, which could be hard to miss since it kind of spawns inside his body, or can depending on how he falls, and it could take you a while to get back to the crystal if you accidentally run into the portal after killing him. Then you click on the 5th crystal and you'll gain a buff which allows you to see a ghost version of Medivh in the Master's Terrace, which will then spawn a mini event that allows you to fight the boss Nightbane. Simply killing Nightbane will drop them out 20% of the time as long as you don't already have it. And this drop chance is increased for the amount of people
there's
in
a
your group
tentacle
who are
over there.
eligible to loot the boss during that week. So if you have 5 people in your group who haven't killed Nightbane yet, then you'll have a 100% chance to drop 1 mount. Although even if you do this solo, which is pretty easy, as long as your item level is higher than 450, then a 20% drop chance is still very good, as far as collecting mounts goes. And you can try this once per week on each character. And at number 7, we have the Shadow Barb Drone. This is a mount which was added to the game in patch 8.3, and can be obtained by simply doing 30 days of dailies. All you need to do is make sure you have the Assault
love our
Zones
tentacle
unlocked, which
talks.
require doing the quest chain that grants the legendary cloak. In order to start the quest chain for this mount, all you have to do is go to Oldham during any invasion at the spot located on screen. Then all you need to do is interact with it to start the quest, which will send you to a Dreadnought Explorer NPC who will then convince you to try to raise it. Over the course of the next 30 days, you'll slowly grow it by feeding it stuff and taking it out in the world in order to do some pet battles and normal battles. At the end of the quest chain, you'll eventually be able to earn the mount, as well as getting a toy and a battle pet along the way. Now, if you're not very well versed in pet battling, then you might run into some problems when you get to the pet battle sections. Although all of the pet battles you have to complete are done in invasion zones, which have pets that scale down to whatever max level pet you have in your party. So if you want to have an easier time, just never level up your Shadow Barb pet, and keep it at level 1. And then just use 2 other level 1 pets with it so that the battles you're doing are scaled down to level 1, which makes it almost trivial. If you do level up your Shadow Barb drone, you can kind of cheese most legendary pet fights with a haunt pet like the Unborn Valk, and a Black Claw Stampede user, like the Zandalari Raptors or Inky. Also, be careful on the portion of the quest which requires you to take a drone out in battle when you're doing the invasions, because if you're in war mode during that quest, it is possible for the enemy faction to kill your drone, and that will just end the daily for that day. And then after 30 days, you'll get your guaranteed mount. And at number 6, we have the Snapdragon Kelpstalker. This is a mount which can be obtained by getting one of your Nazjatar followers to level 20. For Horde, it's specifically Nary Sharpfin, and for Alliance, it's Hunter Akana. As soon as you get that particular follower to rank 20, they'll offer you a very short quest which basically just gives you the mount. Now, in order to get them to level 20, you first need to unlock them by doing the short quest chain which introduces you to the Zone of Nazjatar. You unlock the ability to choose one of those 3 followers every day very early on in the Zone quest chain, and you simply pick the one associated to this mount for each day. They will have a series of 3 daily quests.
Yeah, the problem I was having is
after completing all 3 of them,
I couldn't get those slimes down quick enough.
So if you do all of their dailies for 20 days in a row, then you'll get them to rank 20 no problem. There are ways to speed this up a little bit if you find special items for them, but for the most part you don't really need to worry about that. But it is technically possible to speed it up a tiny bit.
I just kind of like kept the tentacles down and then just let everything pile up. And then as soon as I saw one of the amalgamations running from your side, I would go ahead and lean over real quick and kill everything. And then by the time he got over there, it was enough stacks.
But there's also a couple that work on all your bodyguards.
Just gotta stand there and be patient, I guess.
Or ones that give reputation to all 3 of them at once, like the Ancient Reefwalker Bark. So if you go out and farm those ones, you can get them to rank 20 in less than 20 days. Although even without it, you do still get it a little bit faster than the previous spot on this list. And at number 5, we have the Ruby Shell Crawlisk. This mount can simply be bought from a vendor near the Warfront table for 200 Horde surface medals. There is also an Alliance version called the Azure Cell Crawlisk, which is obtained basically the same way, just from the Alliance version of the vendor. Now, getting 200 service medals can sound like a daunting task, since you only get 5 of them for completing an invasion, and you only get 1 for completing a world quest or a daily associated to a Warfront zone. However, actually completing a Warfront will give you 15 the first time you do them on normal, and then the Battle for Darkshore on Heroic gives you 50. That's the one you want to aim for, once a week, assuming your faction has access to Darkshore. You can easily find a group that's running it for the weekly in order to get a quick 50 service medals, which will contribute to 25% of the amount you need in order to get the mount. If you just do the one Warfront on Heroic each time it's available, you'll be able to get it after 4 times. You can also get the 15 in addition to the 50, so it's actually 65 each time, but it will still take 4 times before you get the amount needed for the 200, assuming you did nothing else. You can also do the invasions every time they come up for an additional 5. That can sometimes also allow you to get reputation Paragon boxes for your faction, which will give you an additional 20, as well as around 4,000 gold. And since right before Shadowlands there's a 100% rep buff, as of making this video, now would be a really good time to grind this out. If you're watching this in the future, it might be a little bit harder to find groups for the Horde service medals, but you still can do the invasions every day and slowly get the amount of service medals you need. There are also other mounts you can obtain with the service medals, but they cost a lot more, so they don't actually make this video, as 200 is not that hard to get, and easily allows that mount to make a spot on this list of easiest mounts to get. And at number 4, we have the 3 Cloud Serpents from the Order of the Cloud Serpent rep in Mist of Pandaria. Grinding this rep to Exalted will allow you to purchase 3 mounts that are all under 1,000 gold each, and just like with the Sons of Hodir rep, this grind has recently been made a lot easier with the changes to time walking. Now, Mist of Pandaria rep has a little bit of a leg up on some of the Wrath of the Lich King reps, since as soon as you hit Revered with the faction, you're able to buy an item called the Grand Commendation of the Order of the Cloud Serpent, which gives you a 100% bonus to all of your rep with the
There's
Order
a
of the Cloud
hard mode
Serpent,
for this?
which extends to all characters on your account. This was supposed to be a way to have a catch-up mechanic for all of your alts in Mist of Pandaria, since you needed to unlock the rep vendors in order to spend your badge currency. Although you're able to unlock this 100% rep bonus before you hit Exalted, which kind of makes getting to Exalted a lot easier as it allows you to get a lot more rep during one of the longest grinds of the reputation. So all you do is the intro quest in order to unlock the faction, which is a lot less than the ones needed to unlock the Sons of Hodir. Then there'll just be a whole bunch of daily quests you can do that will give you rep. You can completely ignore the daily quests if you just use the time walking currency to buy the item that gives you rep for the Order of the Cloud Serpent. You can also go around and farm Quivering Firestorm eggs in order to turn those in for rep, or you can just do the dailies every day and unlock it the old-fashioned way, which only takes a couple of weeks. Much shorter if you start doing the dailies during Mist of Pandaria Time Walking Week, which will increase reputation gains by an additional 50%. In fact, it's entirely possible to start the rep grind and then complete it all within the Mist of Pandaria Time Walking Week, due to the additional rep and the tokens you can buy with Time Walking currency, which increase your rep further. And at number 3, we have Garn Nighthowl. This is a mount which has a 100% drop chance from a rare in Warlords of Draenor named Nak Karash, who's at this location on the map in Frostfire Ridge, and has about a 20 to 40 minute respawn timer. Now, what makes this mount particularly easy to obtain is 1, it has a 100% drop chance, 2, it has a short respawn timer for a rare that drops a mount, and 3, the mount is not bind on pickup. So you can actually just buy it off the auction house for pretty cheap, since it's so easy to get. As of making this video, the prices for this mount go around 1,000 gold, give or take, where some of them going up to 5,000 gold on one of the servers I play on, which is still pretty cheap. Although your mileage on trying to get this mount the old-fashioned way may vary. On one of my servers, I went to the spawn location and was being camped by a couple of other people. Then I hopped onto another one of my servers and there was no one there, and the NPC was available as soon as I just got to the location. And I was able to get the kill and grab the mount even though I already had it, since I can just sell on the
must be in the process of killing it now.
Out of all the rare mobs in Draenor that drop mounts, Garn Nighthowl is the easiest one to obtain, especially since it can be bought and sold on the auction house for so cheap. And at number 2, we have the Alabaster Hyena, as well as 5 other mounts you can obtain for getting exalted reputations with your 3 main BFA reputation hubs. In both Zandalar and Kolteros, there is a reputation associated to all 3 of the zones, And if you simply get those reputations to Exalted, there are 2 mounts available from the zone's quartermasters for 10,000 gold and 72,000
Didn't Key
gold,
want to join
respectively,
for
after
Jaina?
faction discounts.
I think
the
so.
72,000 gold mounts are kind of pricey, although each of these vendors also has a much cheaper 10,000 gold mount, which is a lot more affordable to people who aren't just completely terrible at making gold. Remember, you can get 4,000 gold from a Paragon box, which is obtained after getting Exalted rep with the reputations in BFA zones. And if you have the ability to gain those Paragon boxes, that means you already have the rep needed in order to buy these mounts in the first place. It is super easy to get these mounts unlocked by simply doing
Anyone
world
else
quests or
want to
emissaries
join?
when they're available
I
in the zone.
already own mount so
As
I
of
can
making
trade
this
it if
video,
it drops,
there is a
etc.
100% rep buff going on that makes this almost trivial. All of my max level alts are exalted with all of the base
I think it's
factions,
a
and it really did
1%
not take
chance
very
now
much
these
to do so.
days.
And at number 1, we have the Mechanocat X995. This is a mount that holds a distinction where you can actually dye it to 8 different colors, and it's obtainable rather easily in Mechagon. All you have to do is unlock the ability to create Mechagon tinkering. Then you just have to go to an NPC known as Pascal K1N6 to buy a schematic for 500 gold. That will teach your robot how to create the Mechanocat laser pointer, which ultimately allows you to learn how to use this mount. The hardest part of all this would just be grinding out the materials needed to create the mount, which are honestly not that bad. When I was researching this video, I had completely missed the schematic required in order to make this mount, and as soon as I bought the schematic, I already had the materials in my bank to make it without having to farm anything else out, despite the fact that I hadn't done anything on Mechagon in months. So if I had the materials just lying around in my bank, then you might probably have it too if you missed it like I did. However, assuming you're watching this in the future and you're starting from zero, or you just completely didn't do Mechagon for one reason or another, the materials can be gathered by just killing rares on the
I have
island,
the skip.
doing daily quests, including the daily world quest, and farming up 2,000 spare parts, so that you can combine them into the 8 spare crates you need. Farming the spare parts might be the most difficult thing to do from scratch, in which case you can just go to this zone here on the map and just kill all the NPCs in this little area, since it's one of the best spots to farm spare parts. This is definitely a mount you can probably grind out in a day, or if you might already had the materials for it and you just played BFA normally, you can probably go grab it in 5 minutes like I did as soon as I found out about it. There are 6 crafting professions in World of Warcraft, and each profession has the ability to craft specific and unique mounts. Currently, there are 21 mounts which players can craft, and today we'll go over the profession mounts that are the most intensive to craft.
You
in
guys
terms of what
phase?
required, the gold cost for all the materials, and the time it takes to actually craft and farm the parts for the mount itself. Although the gold cost fluctuates often, so take them more as guidelines. And at number 10, we have the turbocharged flying machine. This engineer crafted mount was added to the Burning Crusade, specifically patch 2.3, and it is currently going for about 43,000 gold on average on the auction house as of writing this video. The schematic for this mount can be learned by any engineer.
Yeah,
trained
we're
in the Burning
phased from
Crusade,
you.
since the
We're
required
just
ingredients for
vibing
crafting this mount
outside.
change
You
with
do
the
have it
craft.
set
We'll
Mythic,
first be
right?
looking at
Can
how
you
the mount
guys
was
summon
crafted
these
in the Burning
people?
Crusade. In TBC, the turbocharged flying machine was actually an epic mount, and you have to craft
It's
the flying
Mythic
machine
now.
control, which is the basic flying version, to be used in the recipe to craft the epic mount. Meaning you'd usually end up crafting this mount twice. Once
I
to
guess
use
the
yourself,
hunter
and then a
didn't
second time to
join.
use in the crafting the epic variant. Without going into all the lengthy details, a player would need 100 fel iron ore, 85 motes of fire, 10 motes of earth, 16 corium ore, 4 eternium ore, 8 starwood, and 1 hula girl doll. All of the materials can be obtained from mining except the hula girl doll, which is sold by Griftath, and costs between 80 to 100 gold depending on reputation with a lower city. At the beginning of Wrath, the flying machine control was replaced by 4 adamantite frames, which cost in total 16 adamantite ore and 40 emotes of earth. And while the adamantite frames could be instead purchased from some vendors, they still cost a pretty penny, and also
It's
were
a
limited
raining
and heavily sought
man.
after, meaning you usually
Hallelujah.
just crafted / bought the items from another player. Some of these ingredients can be bought from various vendors, but they're usually limited in quantity or on random spawn timers. Overall, there are only 2 professions which are required to make the turbocharged flying machine: engineering and mining. The only actual required gold cost for this mount is having to buy the starwood and the hula girl doll, but that in total only usually costs around 100 gold.
Since you're
to set.
phased, you
And at
can
number
probs
9,
go
we have
active the skip
steel-bound
while we fill
devourer.
Crown.
This is a mount that can only be made by blacksmith and was added in Legion. The recipe for this
Sounds
fell green
good.
doggy has a 2% drop rate from Tichondrius and the Nighthold in any difficulty except LFR. As of the making of this video, it's running around 45,000 gold at the auction house. The recipe for this mount isn't too bad to make. The main obstacle of crafting the steel-bound devourer, after obtaining the recipe, is that it just takes some time and traveling around the Broken Isles. First, the player needs 100 demon steel bars, so they must go to the Firmament Stone and High Mountain in the Ironhorn Enclave and make 100 demon steel bars there. One demon steel bar is 2 felslate ore and 1 laystone ore, so the player will need 200 felslate ore and then 100 laystone ore in total. The firmament stone is the only place that players can make the demon steel bars, which means it is required to go there to craft them. Next, the player must acquire 50 blood of Sargeras, which can be obtained by...
Are they joining and leaving because they're alliance? Is that what's going on?
The player must do the blacksmith only Infernal Brimstone world quest multiple times to obtain 10 Infernal Brimstone from the big demon boy that spawns when the world quest is active. Finally, the player must either have the skinny profession or buy 10 Fellhide from the auction house. This means if you want to gather all the materials and make this mount all by yourself,
shouldn't be. Make sure the listing is set horde
Additionally,
only.
the quest chain to unlock making demon steel bars is kind of long, annoying, and boring on its own, leading to a rather tiresome mount to get. And at number 8, we have the Sky Golem from Mista Pandaria. This engineering crafted mount is very sought after for its ability to pick herbs while being mounted. The journal for this mount drops from most
limit
mobs in the
to horde
blossoms in Siege of Orgrimmar, but
at
it
the
has
bottom
a
of
very
it.
low drop rate, usually less than 0.5% for most mobs. The schematic also teaches the player how to craft the pet Pierre, which is a little robot butler, a Rascalbot, a little red robot companion, and an advanced refrigeration unit, a 36-slot cooking bag. All of them using another item the recipe teaches you how to craft, the Jard's Peculiar Energy Source, and 30 of these are needed to craft the mount. The mount was added in 5.4, the titular Siege of Orgrimmar. The mount takes at least 30 days to craft because 2 of the main ingredients can only be made once per day, and there are 30 needed of each of them. The first of these 2 ingredients is the previously mentioned Jard's Peculiar Energy Source, which is from the engineering profession and has a 1-day cooldown. And to make matters worse, Jard's Peculiar Energy Source is bind on pickup, so it cannot be traded or sold to other players. Since 1 is made from 10 ghost iron bars, and 1 ghost iron bar requires 2 ghost iron ore, the player will need a minimum of 600 ghost iron ore to craft the components themselves. The second ingredient is 30 living steel, which is made from the alchemy profession using 6 trillion bars, and can be made in 2 different ways. One of which requires 30 days because of the daily cooldown, while the other way removes the daily cooldown using Spirits of Harmony. 3 Spirits of Harmony and 3 trillion bars per living steel allows you to technically do it in 1 day. However, having to wait 30 days for the Jards means you might as well wait. And of course, living steel is not bind on pickup, so for engineering players, you do not need to worry about picking up alchemy, and can instead buy these from the auction house. Overall, crafting this mount requires the engineering, mining, and alchemy professions. The 1-day cooldowns and crafting mats ensures the Sky Golem can never be made too fast, so there's always a constant demand for the mount, since they can't be made fast enough to
Thank you guys got everybody.
As of writing this video, the Sky
I've
Golem
got
mount was
3
going
of
for
them
an
in here
average
with
of
me.
roughly 47,500 gold
4
on
of
the
them.
auction house. And at number 7,
Yeah, you
we
guys can
have
come on in. We'll
Zilliwag
just do it like this.
This is the mount that was added in Battle for Azeroth and requires both engineering and blacksmithing professions to craft. If you want to make this mount, you're going to become terribly familiar with the dungeon The Motherlode, since all of its component crafting recipes drop from the dungeon. The mount crafting recipe calls for 2 main parts, the supercharged engine, which can only be crafted from engineering, and the monolite reinforced chassis, which can only be crafted from blacksmithing. These 2 parts each have a different recipe, and since their drop rates are both under 1% from the boss Cujo and the Motherlode, you'll probably be farming for quite a while just to get both recipes to drop.
Fucking
To make
pugs,
matters worse,
man.
the recipes are bind on pickup, so you can't give them to other players. Luckily, this is the hardest part of making this mount, since most of the mats needed to craft the Zilliwag ATV are obtained by simply mining ores. The player will need 175 monolite ore and 115 storm silver ore. In addition to all the mining ores needed, there are several blacksmithing and engineering mats that are required. Luckily, these are sold by vendors and they're relatively cheap and end up costing less than 20 gold overall. Finally, the player will need to scrap several items in order to get 8 Explosum from the Scrap-O-Matic 1000 or the Shredmaster MK1 located in Borealis and Tazar.
Why is that idiot going off by
Overall, this
himself?
mount
Why are
isn't
we
too
so
bad to
spread
make,
out?
But since it has such a long and tedious grind just to get the 2 recipe parts, that it can certainly become quite the headache to craft. As such, its rarity makes it sell for much more in the auction house than many would expect, since its demand far outweighs its current supply. If a player wanted to make this mount all by themselves and farm their own mats, they would need engineering, blacksmithing, and mining. However, for people who don't have unlimited amounts of time and alts, they can simply craft 1 part, then buy the other part off the auction house with the other profession, and sell their own parts to make some money back from people of the opposite profession doing the same. This mount also has 3 color variations, which can be unlocked by talking to the goblin Cram Colada on Mechagon Isle. Zwillylag is Gallywag spelled backwards, in case you hadn't noticed. According to Wowhead's aggregate data, this mount goes for roughly 25,000 gold, totaling to 50k in the auction house as of making this video. And at number 6, we have a tie between 2 engineering mounts from Wrath of the Lich King. These 2 mounts, the Mechanohog and the Mechgineer's Chopper, were both selling for around 50,000 gold when this video was being made. The reason these 2 mounts can be tied is because they require the exact same materials to craft. It's just that the Mechanohog is Horde exclusive, and the Mechgineer's Chopper is Alliance exclusive. The schematic for the Mechanohog can be bought when the player is exalted with the Horde Expedition from the 2 Quartermasters in the Born Tundra and the Howling Fjord, named Gara Skullcrusher and
They deserve
Sebastian
that.
Crane, respectively. The Mech-Engineer's Chopper schematic can be bought from the Alliance Vanguard Quartermaster when the Alliance player sits exalted with that faction. The 2 Quartermasters for this faction are also in the same 2 zones previously mentioned, and they are named the Logistics Officer Silverstone in the Born Tundra and the Logistics Officer Brighton in the Howling Fjord. Both schematics cost 400 gold. The first ingredient to make these mounts is 12 Titan steel bars, which themselves can be quite a pain to make. 3 titanium bars are required to make 1 Titan steel bar, and 2 titanium ore make 1 titanium bar, meaning the player needs 72 titanium ore entirely. In addition to the titanium bars, 1 Titan steel bar also requires 1 eternal fire, 1 eternal earth, and 1 eternal shadow. 10 crystallized elements makes 1 eternal element, which means the player ultimately needs 120 crystallized fire, 120 crystallized earth, and 120 crystallized shadow. There are several other ways to make these materials through alchemy via transmuting, but to list them all would take too long since there are so many. Next, 40 cobalt
Gotta
ore
stay
makes
together
40
as a
cobalt
group,
bars,
keep
which
each
in
other
turn
warm.
makes 40 handful of cobalt bolts via engineering. The next ingredient that is needed is simply 2 Arctic furs, but to obtain them, the player requires a skinning profession, or will have to buy them from another player. The final ingredients are all fairly expensive
Still
items
spreading
that
out.
must
You
be
guys,
bought from
we
a
gotta
goblin
get
named
together.
Foxy Ramrocket in the Storm Peaks. These ingredients are 1 salvaged iron golem parts at 3,000 gold for just 1, 8 goblin machine pistons, which are 1,000 gold each, and 1 elementium plated exhaust pipe, which costs 1,500 gold. In all, the total minimum
bad.
gold requirement to build the mount, including the schematic itself, comes out to just under 13,000 gold. Overall, these 2 mounts require the engineering, mining, blacksmithing, and the skinning professions to complete in their entirety, with the alchemy profession being optional and supplementary. There are a few more notes before we move on to the number 5 spot. The Mechanohog and Mech-Engineer's Chopper mounts have been extremely rare drop chances from the Blingatron 4000 gift package, as well as the 5,000, 6,000, and 7,000 gift packages, and assuming all future gift packages. Additionally, some fun facts about these things. If you look closely at the license plates of both of these vehicles, they have PWN, which can be pronounced as Pone. Finally, obtaining this mount awards the achievement Get to the Choppa, which must be said in the Arnold Schwarzenegger accent. And at number 5, we have Vial of the Sands from Cataclysm. This is the only alchemy mount in the game and allows the user to transform into a sandstone drake. While in this form, another player can ride on the dragon's back. Currently, the Vial of the Sands is going for just over 72,000 gold on the auction house. This mount is rare and expensive in 3 ways. First, the recipe is extremely
Okay, we're
hard to
gonna
obtain. Secondly,
run
some of the ingredients that are required must be bought from vendors,
see
and
if I
they
can
cost a
find the
heavy amount of
spot.
gold themselves. Finally, there are an enormous amount of mats to farm to actually make the Vial of the Sands. To obtain the recipe, the player must have learned the secondary profession archaeology skill and be excavating a Tolvir dig site, which can only be found in Old Doom. To make matters worse, all the Countdoor
run.
shares a handful of random archaeology dig
Is
sites.
it over
meaning
here?
That a player will have to
Oh.
do other dig sites all over the continent and hope
Oh, you
of
just can
completing
run in
one
and just kill her.
having a new
Okay.
Tolvir dig site spawn in Oldham. Additionally, the recipe has a very low drop chance of only 2%.
It is. That
dropping
one will
one
get you.
specific
That one will
artifact,
get you
which
fucking
is the
heated.
Canonic Jar.
Especially you come in here and
The
do it by
Canonic Jar
yourself and you
itself
bring 8 or
requires
9 people with you.
45 Tolvir artifact fragments
And
to complete.
everybody's just
All
running
this
off
means the
different
grind for
ways
the
and
recipe
stuff.
itself is a lot of work, since it's locked behind 3 layers of RNG. The first layer being the Tolvir dig sites being up at all in Oldham, the second being you get the Canonic Jar, and the third being the drop rate of the recipe when you open the Canonic Jar. The recipe for the Vial of Sands calls for 2 expensive ingredients. The first required ingredient is 1 Pyrium laced crystalline vial, which costs 5,000
That was
gold.
good, though.
and
At
can
least we
only be
broke-
bought
everybody
from
broke each
Yasmin,
other out
who
of
is
that
the
one.
innkeeper of the Oasis of Virsar. The second ingredient is called Sands of
Somebody
Time, which is
freaking
also
horsed
sold
up.
by
One of the
Yasmin.
paladins
One
just
Sands
like
of Time costs
choom,
3,000
just went
gold,
off
and
all
the
by
recipe
himself.
calls for 8 of them. In total, that means crafting this mount will set you back at least 29,000 gold for the crafting materials. The remaining
All
ingredients are
right,
12
well,
true
we
gold,
lasted
8
a
flasks
cou-
of
I
runes, 8
lasted a
flasks of
couple more
titanium
hours than I
string, and 8
thought.
deepstone oil. The deepstone oil is by far the easiest to come across, since all it requires is the fishing
Guess
skill
I'll just
and
call it
quality.
Yeah,
here.
the
We'll get back
palace
to
kept
running keys this
fucking us
weekend.
over. If all
One
of us
albino
stacked
crayfish
with
gives
how
1
many we had,
deepstone oil,
wouldn't
and
have
the
had
recipe
that
only needs
issue.
8. True gold can only be created through alchemy, and to make 1 true gold requires 3 pure
Yeah.
bars, 10 volatile fire, 10 volatile air, and 10 volatile water. All of these materials can be acquired
Not a
by
big
mining
wow
and in
day
the
for
same
people
cases
today, I
by
get it.
looting mobs and bosses. Since the recipe for the mount calls for 12 true gold, that's 36 pyrite ore to make 36
Yeah,
pyrites
I'll be back
and
tomorrow,
120 each
so
type for the
maybe,
3 aforementioned volatile elements. To make
I
matters
don't know, maybe
even
it'll
worse,
be
in
a bunch of
Cataclysm,
people
the
wanting to do
ability
keys
transmute
this
true
weekend
gold
or
have a
whatever.
1-day cooldown.
We'll
So you
see.
can only make 1 true gold a day. Lastly, there are 16
Just hang out
flasks
like
in
we did
total
today,
needed
I
as the last
guess.
ingredients.
If
In
not,
total, the collective ingredients of all
feel like
the
I'm losing
flasks
my
are
voice a little bit.
128 volatile life,
He'll just be
128
vibing.
whip
Bird
tail,
won't be
64
home
iron
till
arms
9.
veils, 64
Okay.
Wanna
cinder
go to
blooms, and
beefs?
16 crystal vials.
So I'm
All
just
the
No.
be
materials for the
chilling.
flask can be
No,
obtained
I'm
from
good,
gathered
thank you.
herbs, with the exception of the crystal vial, which is just
Just gonna hang out.
at a small cost. In terms of the total number of materials required, that's a little over 800 individual
Thank you for
items
the
in
offer,
the
though.
Vial of the Sands. Also, this mount technically requires 5 different professions to obtain all of its ingredients: alchemy, archaeology, fishing, herbalism, and mining. Upon
Ground
finally
mounts
learning the
are
mount, you will
not
receive an
allowed
achievement,
here.
which is
I'ma go
unsurprisingly
do the
called
rest of
Violet
those
Sands.
mount runs
And
on
at
my
number 4,
druid
we
now.
have the Geosynchronous World Spinner,
Which
is a gnome-themed
what do you mean the
engineering
rest?
mount only available to Alliance players.
Oh,
that was
you mean
listed
the,
in area. As of writing this video,
ones you
the
can
mount
buy
was
in the
going
auction
for
house?
roughly 112,000 gold
Undasta
at the
and
auction house. This
Thundering?
mount can be learned from any list of
ICC,
Pandaria
Shah,
engineering
etc.
framework. The first ingredient in the recipe for the Geosynchronous World Spinner
Okay.
calls for 12 living steel, which can only be made via alchemy. First, as with all alchemy transmutations, don't forget to have the Philosopher's Stone equipped. Transmute living steel turns 6 trillion.
Alrighty, guys. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Put it on usual time. And maybe run some keys. You guys have a great night. I'll see you later.
No, the ones I cannot do with you since I'm ally on my druid, so ICC, Shah, on Dasta, can't buy him off the RBTW, he's just like Shah.
Which one is it that you can get? It's the bones. You buy the bones off the auction house. Oh, that's Reigns of the Bone
Nalik.
White Primal Raptor. Okay, it's a different mount then.
Nalik is something you can get off I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that's the red thundering one or whatever. Alrighty, guys, I'll
Yeah,
see
it's
y'all.
thundering.
See y'all later. Good night.